Chapter 21-22. Yours. Nietion frowned and looked at the man from the Swiftwind clan in the iron cage. Yes, yes, yes. The man nodded repeatedly, as if he had found his last hope. He stared at Nietion with blazing eyes and said, My lord, I still have many blood-weeping sword infants with me. If you want them, I can give them all to you. You just need to ask these people from the Dark Moon sect to let me go. Little brat, shut up. The man in black reacted and looked at the man from the Swiftwind clan. He said in a cold tone, If you dare to say another word, I will kill you. Shut up. Nietion shouted angrily when he saw this. The man in black was so frightened that he retreated and did not dare to shout again. Nietion looked at the man from the Swiftwind clan and smiled faintly. If I'm not wrong, you are from the Swiftwind clan, right? Yes, yes, yes. My lord has good eyesight. I am indeed from the Swiftwind clan. My name is Gale Xiao Xiao. Gale Xiao Xiao nodded repeatedly and said with a chuckle, Gale Xiao Xiao. Nietion could not help but curl his lips when he heard this name. This guy's physique and name were quite compatible. Gale Xiao Xiao, you said that the blood-weeping sword infant is yours. Where did you get it? Nietion's eyes darkened and his tone became gloomy. He had to get to the bottom of everything in front of him because it concerned Sakura's life and death. If Gale Xiao Xiao knew where the blood-weeping sword infant was, then he probably knew where the 9-demon fire fox was. Unexpectedly, Gale Xiao Xiao was a little hesitant. He seemed unwilling to say where he had gotten the blood-weeping sword infant. Gale Xiao Xiao, I will give you one last chance to speak. If what you say is not what I want to hear, then I will turn around and leave. You can continue playing with these people from the Dark Moon sect, Nietion said with a cold smile and raised his eyebrows. My lord, don't go. I will tell you. I will tell you everything, okay? Gale Xiao Xiao seemed to be very afraid of the people from the Dark Moon sect. When he heard that Nietion was leaving, he immediately panicked and said, I stole the blood-weeping sword infant. Stole it? Nietion frowned and asked, Where did you steal it from? From the Dark Moon sect? Nietion frowned and asked. Gale Xiao Xiao chuckled and explained, My lord, although I'm a thief, I'm definitely a good thief. The Dark Moon Church isn't anything good. They're the bad guys. Nietion's face darkened. He turned to look at the black-clothed cultivator and asked in a deep voice, Is what he said true? He did Tian Xiao, Xiao, Xiao Xiao Long, but he was where? Long Xiao Xiao Tian and Xiao Xiao Long, Xiao Tian, Xiao Yi. If the blood-weeping sword infant truly belonged to the Dark Moon Divine sect, then it was highly likely that the 9-demon fire fox was in the Dark Moon Divine sect. It's true. The black-clothed martial artist nodded and said, This kid has stolen many things from the Dark Moon Divine Church, not just the blood-weeping sword infant. The blood-weeping sword infant in Gale Xiao Xiao's possession was indeed stolen from the Dark Moon Divine Church. This was also the reason why he was being hunted. In fact, this was not the first time he had stolen from the Dark Moon Divine Church, and he had always been able to escape safely. However, he had been too careless this time and had fallen into the Dark Moon Church's ambush at the outskirts of the Dark Night Mountain Range. That was why he had ended up like this. Originally, he thought that he was dead for sure this time, but he did not expect that Nietion and the others would appear. Now, Nietion was the only person who could save him, so of course he had to hold on to him tightly. Do you have a 9-demon fire fox? Nietion asked cold as he looked at the black-clad cultivator. What? The black-clothed cultivator was stunned. He did not understand what Nietion was talking about. Let me ask you, does the Dark Moon Divine Church have a 9-demon fire fox? Nietion's face was as gloomy as water, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. No. The black-clothed cultivator shook his head. He could feel the killing intent from Nietion, and his entire body was trembling. He simply couldn't understand why a mighty mid-paramount god like himself would be so afraid of a late over-god. Really? Nietion's eyes were as cold as ice as he asked again. Really? The black-clothed cultivator shook his head again. His back was covered in sweat, and even his tailbone felt cold. Nietion's eyes were too terrifying. That cold and sinister killing intent made him tremble in fear. Nietion frowned. After confirming that the black-clothed cultivator was not lying, his expression became much more disappointed. The Dark Moon Divine Church only had a blood-weeping sword infant. If they did not have one, then they would have a firefox. This was a result that Nye Tian had not expected. Just like that, all the time he had spent here had been wasted. He had to look for new clues now. At this moment, Gale Little stared at Nye Tian with his fox-like eyes. He thought to himself, why does this guy want a 9-demon firefox? Gale Little was already surprised that Nye Tian could recognize the blood-tear sword infant. Now that Nye Tian mentioned a 9-demon firefox, he was even more confused. Gale Little, do you know where a 9-demon firefox is? Just as Gale Little was feeling confused, a deep, old voice suddenly rang out, giving him a fright. The person who had asked Gale Little was not Nye Tian, but Ming Jinyu. I don't know. I don't even know what a 9-demon firefox is. This is the first time I've heard of it. Gale Little reacted, and his eyes flickered. You really don't know? Ming Jinyu let out a strange laugh. With his experience, how could he not tell that Gale Xiao was obviously lying? I swear to the heavens, I really don't know, Gale Little said confidently, almost swearing an oath. Nye Tian, since that is the case, let's go, Ming Jinyu said to Nye Tian with a faint smile. Nye Tian was stunned. He could tell that Gale Little was lying. However, he immediately understood that Ming Jinyu was testing Gale Little. Following that, Nye Tian and Ming Jinyu turned around at the same time, preparing to leave. When Gale Little saw that Nye Tian and the others were really leaving, he immediately panicked and screamed, "My lord! My lord! My lord! Where are you going? Are you not going to save me? Gale Little, we are not good people. Why should we save someone who is useless to us?" Ming Jinyu waved his hand and left. "My lord, I am useful, I am useful." Gale Little was really panicking now. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead as he shouted, "I have many blood-weeping sword infants with me. As long as you save me, the blood-weeping sword infants are all yours." "Sorry, we are not interested in the blood-weeping sword infants," Nye Tian shouted, and his figure was already 100 meters away. This time, Gale Little was completely panicking. His small hands kept wiping the cold sweat off his forehead, and his eyes kept flickering. It was obvious that he was thinking quickly. Chapter 21-23. When Nye Tian and Ming Jinyu heard Gale Xiao's words, their bodies froze. They exchanged a smile before turning around and walking back. Ming Jinyu was indeed a wily old fox. He easily took a few steps and got Gale Xiao to tell him the truth. Nye Tian walked to the side of the cage and smiled. He said, "Gale Xiao, let me remind you. If you lie, I will make sure you die a painful death." "I am not lying. I am not lying. Gale Xiao, never lie." Gale Xiao shook his head repeatedly. Then he looked at the black-clad cultivator and said, "My lord, get him to open the cage first. Once I leave, I will immediately tell you where the 9-demon firefox is." Nye Tian laughed and said, "Gale Xiao, do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? You are from the Swift Wind race. I have already seen how fast you are. I'm afraid that as soon as the cage opens, you'll disappear without a trace in an instant. Who will I reason with then? My lord, don't worry. Although I, Gale Xiao, am a thief, I am definitely a righteous thief. I will definitely do what I have promised." Gale Xiao chuckled as his eyes flickered. Nye Tian did not believe his nonsense. With one look, he could tell that this fellow was a slippery fellow. He did not speak a single word of truth. "Gale Xiao, tell me now, where is the 9-demon firefox?" Nye Tian did not beat around the bush and asked directly. "My lord, don't make things difficult for me. I'm just an insignificant person. If I leak the information about the 9-demon firefox, someone will kill me." Gale Xiao appeared to be in a difficult position. He was actually unwilling to speak. "All right then. In that case, let the people of the Dark Moon Divine Church kill you first." Nye Tian raised his eyebrows and turned to leave. My lord, come back quickly." Gale Xiao immediately panicked and screamed, "My lord, how about this? If you save me, I will bring you to the 9-demon firefox. Is that all right?" "All right. Nyetion did not wish to waste his breath on Gale. He nodded and looked at the black-clad cultivator. Then, he said coldly the key. What? The black-clothed martial artist did not react and asked in astonishment. The key to open the cage, Nyetion said, pointing at Gale Xiao Xiao. Oh! The black-clothed cultivator reacted and walked over shakily. He handed the key to the cage to Nyetion and then retreated to the side, not daring to breathe too loudly. Nyetion received the key and immediately put it away. Then, he looked at the black-clothed cultivator and said in a cold voice, "What are you all still doing here? Still not scramming? Are we going to wait for death?" The black-clothed martial artist was stunned. He did not expect that Nyetion would actually tell them scram. He had thought that Nyetion would kill them all. Now that Nyetion had let them go, of course, he was very surprised. In an instant, 40 to 50 martial artists scattered in all directions in terror, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Gale Xiao Xiao looked at Nyetion and said with a frown, "My lord, they are from the Dark Moon sect. You really shouldn't have let them go. If the Dark Moon sect comes looking for you, you'll be in trouble." "Is the Dark Moon Divine sect really that scary?" Nyetion laughed but didn't deny it. He was not a cruel and bloodthirsty person. He did not have any grudges with these black-clothed men, so he naturally would not kill them. "Of course the Dark Moon sect is scary," Gale Xiao Xiao said in a strange voice. "In the entire Forsaken Land, the Dark Moon sect is one of the few first-rate forces. These guys are just small fries in the Dark Moon sect. The elite disciples of the Dark Moon sect are all at least late-stage supreme gods. They are very powerful." Nyetion frowned and said with a faint smile, "I don't want to provoke the Dark Moon sect. If they really want to cause trouble for me, I'm not afraid of them." Gale Xiao Xiao looked at Nyetion with a puzzled expression. He thought to himself, this guy is quite arrogant. Could he be from one of the major families? In the Forsaken Land, only the major families at the peak could look down on the Dark Moon sect. Gale Xiao Xiao saw that Nyetion's reaction was so calm, so he suspected that the latter was from one of the major families. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Nyetion was someone who had just arrived in the Forsaken Land. "Gale Xiao Xiao, let's go now. Please take us to the 9-demon fire fox." Nyetion smiled faintly, picked up the iron cage, and walked forward. "My lord, aren't you going to let me out?" Gale Xiao Xiao squeaked. He didn't expect Nyetion to bring him along. "Before we find the 9-demon fire fox, you'd better stay in the cage." Nyetion's lips curled into a smile. Gale Xiao Xiao's face darkened, and he couldn't speak for a long time. With Gale Xiao Xiao leading the way, Nyetion and the others arrived outside a majestic ancient city. "My lord Nyetion, this is the Dark Knight City. The person we're looking for is in the city. As long as we find that person, we can find the 9-demon fire fox." Gale Xiao Xiao looked at the ancient city and chuckled. He didn't know where the 9-demon fire fox was, but he claimed that there was someone in the Dark Knight City who had the 9-demon fire fox. "Gale Xiao Xiao, are you sure that the person we're looking for has the 9-demon fire fox?" Nyetion asked with a frown. Gale Xiao Xiao was too slippery, so Nyetion had no choice but to take him at face value. "My lord Nyetion, don't worry. I'm very sure that the old man has the 9-demon fire fox." Gale Xiao Xiao lay back in the cage, looking very pleased with himself. Gale Xiao Xiao, am someone who never lies." Nyetion was speechless. He couldn't even count how many times Gale Xiao Xiao had lied. But in order to save Sakura, Nyetion had no choice but to trust Gale Xiao Xiao. Nyetion and the others entered the city. Because Nyetion was carrying an iron cage with a person inside, he became the center of attention. Nyetion didn't care about the strange looks people were giving him. He didn't know any of them, anyway. However, he realized that the people of the Dark Knight City were generally very strong. Most of them were over-gods, and paramount gods were common. Occasionally, he would even run into peak paramount gods. This was absolutely impossible to encounter in the 9 major realms. Even in the 9 major realms, there weren't many peak paramount gods. From this, it could be seen that the martial artists of the Forsaken Land were indeed stronger than those of the 9 major realms. Tian and the others walked for more than half an hour, almost crossing the entire city, but Gale Xiao didn't let them stop. Gale Xiao, are you messing with us? Tian finally lost his patience and asked cold. No. Gale Xiao chuckled and said, My lord Tian, you must believe me. I'm a righteous thief. I promise you, as long as we cross this street and enter a small alley, we'll find the person we're looking for. All right. Tian forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart and nodded with a gloomy expression. If they still couldn't find the person in the alley, he would really get angry. Chapter 21-24. Tian didn't have the time to talk nonsense with Gale Xiao and continued to walk forward patiently. After he passed through a wide street, an alley appeared in front of him. It was very long and narrow. At a glance, it was at least a few thousand meters long. Gale Xiao, is the person we're looking for in this alley? Tian couldn't help but frown as he looked at the alley in front of him. He was worried that Gale Xiao was playing tricks on him. Could this alley be a trap? Lord Tian, you look like you're not afraid of anything. Why are you so timid when doing things? Gale Xiao could tell what Tian was thinking and chuckled. Don't worry. As long as we enter the alley, we'll definitely find the person we're looking for. Tian frowned. He wouldn't let his guard down just because of a few words from Gale Xiao. As the saying goes, one must always be on guard against others. After experiencing so many things, he still understood this simple principle. However, in the current situation, Tian's life was on the line. Time was of the essence, and there was no time for Tian to think too much. Even if the alley ahead was a trap, he still had to go through it. Tian looked back at Ming Jinyu and nodded slightly to the latter. His heart was much more at ease. With Ming Jinyu, a half-saint powerhouse, by his side, as long as he didn't encounter the peak experts of the abandoned land, Tian wouldn't be afraid. All right, I'll believe you, Gale Xiao this time. Tian looked coldly at Gale Xiao and said solemnly, However, if I don't find the person I'm looking for, the consequences will be more terrifying than you can imagine. I'll make you regret coming to this world. Lord Tian, don't worry. I, Gale Xiao, never lie. Facing Tian's threat, Gale Xiao didn't care at all. Instead, he looked very proud. Tian took a deep breath and stepped into the alley without hesitation. As soon as he entered the alley, Tian felt the surrounding atmosphere change. It seemed to have become much colder. This small alley was very strange, as if it was isolated from the surrounding world. It was very dark inside, and no light could shine in. Tian and the others were very cautious as they walked forward step by step. Fortunately, he walked far into the alley and did not encounter any danger. The moment he stepped out of the alley, Tian suddenly felt his field of vision widen. What appeared in front of him was actually a very spacious place. It was surrounded by ruins, giving off a very desolate feeling. Tian frowned at the sight before him with a puzzled look on his face. He was very surprised. He didn't expect to see such a scene at the other end of the alley. Gale Xiao, what is this place? Where's the person we're looking for? Tian became cold. He looked at Gale a little with a dark expression and asked coldly, Lord Tian, don't be anxious. If you want to see that person, you have to help me solve a problem first. Gale Xiao chuckled and stood up in the iron cage. Solve a problem? Tian's eyes trembled. He couldn't help but become cautious. There was undisguised anger in his eyes. Gale Xiao was indeed cunning. He was really playing with him. Old 19, you've been following me since I entered the city. Aren't you tired after following me for so long? Gale Xiao ignored Tian's anger. He looked into the void and chuckled. Someone's following me? Tian was stunned and his face stiffened. He didn't expect that he was being followed. But how is this possible? Tian's perception was already very powerful. He could detect ordinary martial artists, even if they concealed their aura perfectly. There were only a few people who were good at hiding that Tian couldn't detect. But right now, he had Ming Jinyu, a half-sage, whose perception was far superior to his own. If someone was following them and could escape Ming Jinyu's senses, then that person was either extremely skilled in concealment or possessed terrifying strength. Ming Jinyu's expression stiffened as he looked at Gale Xiao Xiao. "You're a disgrace to the clan, Gale Xiao Xiao. You've disgraced the entire Gale clan." In the next moment, the empty space suddenly trembled. Soon after, a white-clothed figure appeared in the midair. A pair of cold eyes stared intently at Wen Xiao Xiao as he coldly chided. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at the white-robed figure. He looked to be about 20 years old, with delicate features and a tall stature that made him seem heroic. However, this person's gaze was extremely vicious. He was coldly staring at Gale Xiao Xiao, as if he wished to skin him alive. Of course, that wasn't what surprised Nie Tian the most, was that this person was a mid-paramount god. According to Nie Tian's estimation, the person in front of him was under 1,000 years old, which was very young for a god realm cultivator. For someone so young to be so strong meant that he was definitely a martial arts hellion. "He's from the Gale clan," Nie Tian thought, surprised. Glancing at Gale Xiao Xiao, he couldn't help but notice that the two of them were very different in appearance. The first time Nie Tian had seen Gale Xiao Xiao, he had assumed that all Gale clan members looked like him. But now that he saw this person, he realized that it wasn't that the Gale clan members were ugly, but rather that Gale Xiao Xiao was a freak. "Is this how you greet your big brother, 19th brother? No matter what, I am your big brother. As the saying goes, an elder brother is like a father. Could it be that you treat our father with the same attitude?" Gale stood up and stared at the newcomer with his small eyes as he spoke mockingly. "Little Gale, you're a disgrace to the family. You don't have the right to be my big brother." The white-robed man's eyes were filled with rage. "Cold," he said, "you don't even deserve to be a member of the Gale family." "I don't deserve to be a member of the Cyclone family?" Gale sneered and said provocatively. "Gale has no self. Do you dare to say this in front of your father?" Anata Gale, this was the name of this man in white, and his identity was Gale's little 19th brother. Nie Tian's face darkened when he saw the two of them going head-to-head with each other. He never would have thought that Gale Little and Gale Selfless were actually biological brothers. One had to admit that these two brothers were as different as the clouds and the mud. Not only were they vastly different in terms of appearance, but they were also vastly different in terms of talent for the martial Dao. Gale Xiao Xiao was the older brother, but he was only a late Lord God, whereas Gale Selfless was a mid-paramount god. The difference between the two of them was almost an entire level. Such a huge gap was really obvious. That said, Nie Tian didn't have a good impression of Gale Selfless. Just the way Gale Selfless treated Gale Xiao Xiao was enough to make him uncomfortable. It didn't matter how handsome Gale Xiao Xiao was or how talented he was still Gale Selfless' older brother. As the younger brother, he was calling his older brother a disgrace to the family. That was something that Nie Tian couldn't agree with. Chapter 21-25. Nie Tian and Gale Xiao Xiao had not known each other for long and had just met. However, he believed that he had some ability to read people. Although Gale Xiao Xiao was extremely cunning and had lied time and time again, he was definitely not an evil person. Moreover, the first time he saw Gale Xiao Xiao, this fellow had yelled for Nie Tian and the others to get out of the way. From this, it could be seen that this fellow was not a bad person. Gale Xiao Xiao, on the other hand, had a vicious look in his eyes and a bloodthirsty look that made Nie Tian very uncomfortable. Gale Xiao Xiao, to tell you the truth, I came out this time on Father's orders to bring you back. Gale Xiao Xiao smiled cold and said, Father said that this time, regardless of life or death, you must be brought back, regardless of life or death. Gale Xiao Xiao laughed and said, My 19th brother, your expression when you lie is really ordinary. I know that Father doesn't like me, but I believe that he will never kill me. That incident back then made you guys feel embarrassed, so you want to bring me back to the family to confess. However, let me tell you, I will not go back. And I know that the person who wants to kill me is not Father, but you. However, I don't blame you because you are still young. There are some things that you will not understand. Please go back and tell Father that I will naturally go back when I want to. If I don't want to go back, please don't come looking for me again. At this moment, Gale Xiaoxiao's expression was dark and cold. He was a completely different person from his previous playful self. It seemed that Gale Xiaoxiao's appearance had reminded him of many things. Gale Xiaoxiao, since I have come personally, it is not up to you whether you return to the family or not. Gale Xiaoxiao sneered and said, Today, you'll have to go back whether you want to or not. Is that so? Gale Xiaoxiao chuckled, and his expression changed instantly. He looked at Nie Tian and said, Lord Nie Tian, this fellow is so annoying. Please chase him away. We still have important matters to attend to. Nie Tian's gaze froze. Only then did he understand that the trouble that Gale Xiaoxiao wanted him to solve was Gale Xiaoxiao. This Gale Xiaoxiao was really cunning to actually use Nie Tian. Gale, leave. Gale Xiaoxiao and I still have things to do. We don't have time to waste on you, Nie Tian said, looking at Gale selfless with a grim expression. Although he knew that he was being used by Gale, he still had to chase and attack Gale away. Brat, I don't care who you are, but I advise you to leave immediately. You can't afford to interfere in the matters of the Gale Force clan. Gale selfless looked at Nie Tian with a cold and murderous expression and said, Just based on the fact that you imprisoned Gale Xiaoxiao, it's enough for you to die 10,000 times. Nie Tian frowned. He did not expect evasive Gale to be so arrogant. Mizuhara Kaori, I'll leave this guy to you, Nie Tian said to Mizuhara Kaori. To deal with an Ita Gale, there was naturally no need for Ming Jinyu to make a move. Mizuhara Kaori alone was enough. All right, Mizuhara Kaori said with a nod. She blurred into motion, flying up into the air to face off against Gale selfless. You think you can stop me? Gale selfless said, looking at Mizuhara Kaori with no fear in his eyes. In fact, they were filled with scorn. It was as if he didn't care about Mizuhara Kaori at all. Mizuhara Kaori was a late paramount god, whereas Gale selfless was only a mid-paramount god. For him to be so arrogant showed how confident he was in his own abilities. Nie Tian frowned, and couldn't help but feel a bit nervous. He really was worried about Mizuhara Kaori. After all, he had just witnessed Gale Xiaoxiao's speed. Furthermore, Gale selfless was far stronger than Gale Xiaoxiao, so it was hard to say how fast he was. What arrogance! Mizuhara Kaori growled. She couldn't tolerate being looked down upon by someone weaker than her. Her energy surged, and the air around her began to fill with a dense mist. An aegis! Nie Tian couldn't help but shiver as he realized that Mizuhara Kaori had set up an aegis. Mizuhara Kaori was very smart, and she knew that Gale selfless was fast. Therefore, she had set up an aegis to limit his speed. You think you can control me with such a lowly trick? Gale selfless said, seeing through Mizuhara Kaori's intentions with a single glance. Smiling disdainfully, he blurred into motion, and a pair of colorful wings appeared on his back. He shot forward like a bolt of lightning. Boom! In the next moment, Gale selfless slammed into the aegis, shattering it into pieces. Watch out! Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed. It seemed that Mizuhara Kaori had underestimated Gale selfless. But in the next moment, a strange scene happened. The instant the water prison barrier was broken, countless thorny vines suddenly appeared in the air. In an instant, they spread out into space, like thousands of snakes dancing in a frenzy. They extended in a frenzy, grabbing towards Gale and Ita. The sudden turn of events was out of Gale selfless expectation, and he screamed in pain. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Then, countless thorny vines surrounded Gale selfless, trapping him in layers. Nie Tian looked at the scene in the air, and his eyes trembled. Then, he laughed and murmured, It seems that I have underestimated Mizuhara Kaori's strength. I didn't expect his aegis to be a two-layered aegis, and there's another aegis outside. That's right, Mizuhara Kaori's method was far more brilliant than Nie Tian had imagined. He had actually used a two-layered aegis. Outside the aegis was the aegis of the wooden aegis. The aegis of the water aegis was only a facade. The real killer move was the wooden aegis. Mizuhara Kaori was a martial artist of the 5 elements, and such a two-layered aegis was a piece of cake for him. Despicable! Gale selfless was trapped in the wooden aegis, and he roared in anger. His eyes were about to spurt blood. He had never expected Mizuhara Kaori to have two types of elemental energy in his body. His greatest reliance was his extraordinary speed. Now that he was trapped, he could only wait to be slaughtered. Courting death, Mizuhara Kaori sneered. With a thought, the wooden aegis tightened. Ah! The thorny vines pierced into Gale's selfless body like steel needles, causing him to scream like a pig being slaughtered. Don't hurt him! Gale Xiao Xiao was frightened when he saw the situation. He screamed in fear, and sweat beaded on his forehead. It could be seen that he was very nervous. Gale selfless. Although this 19th younger brother had never treated him as a big brother, he had always recognized him as his younger brother. Mizuhara Kaori heard Gale Xiao Xiao scream and immediately stopped. He had no intention of hurting Gale selfless and only wanted to teach him a lesson. Third Elder, save me. Gale selfless Gale did not appreciate the third elder's kindness. Instead, he looked at the void and shouted, He has companions. Nietian's eyes focused, and he suddenly realized what was going on. His expression changed instantly. Chapter 21-26. Gale's selfless sudden call for help greatly surprised Nietian and the others. None of them had expected that there would be other experts lurking around. Sir, can you give me some face and let go of my 19th young master? In the next moment, the void trembled slightly, and a figure in a black robe appeared. His eyes were as deep as the abyss as he stared at Ming Jinyu. The figure of the black-robed man did not make his move. He simply stared at Ming Jinyu, as if he had seen through Ming Jinyu's strength. Third Elder, I didn't expect you to be here too. Gale Little exclaimed in surprise when he saw the black-robed man in the air. This black-robed man was none other than the third elder of the Swift Gale tribe. Gale Xiao Xiao had not expected that Gale Xiao Xiao wasn't the only one who had come to capture him. The third elder of the clan had come as well. The elders of the Swift Gale clan were all extremely powerful people. Normally, they wouldn't leave the clan. For one of them to appear here was beyond Swift Gale's expectations. Eldest young master. Third elder bowed slightly. His attitude towards Gale was actually very respectful. Nietian looked at the third elder and sensed his aura. He was definitely not weaker than the clan leaders of the Nine Li Demon Domain. However, his aura was significantly weaker than Ming Jinyu's. The third elder of the Swift Wind clan was clearly afraid of Ming Jinyu's strength, which was why he did not make a move. Otherwise, he would have shown himself a long time ago instead of waiting for Gale selfless to call for help. Third elder, Invincible Gale, stared at the third elder in shock. He was at a loss for words. He had initially thought that the third elder would recruit everyone after his appearance, but he had not expected the third elder to lower his head to Ming Jinyu. Previously, EVOL Gale did not even look at Ming Jinyu in the eye. He thought that Ming Jinyu was an old servant that followed Nietian and Mizuhara Kaori around. Ming Jinyu was extremely powerful, so he naturally had to conceal his aura. Therefore, ordinary people wouldn't be able to tell his true strength. The third elder behaved very respectfully in front of Ming Jinyu, as if he regarded the latter as someone from some great power. You may leave. Ming Jinyu nodded slightly and did not say anything else. Many thanks. Third elder bowed in gratitude. He was extremely cautious. Mizuhara Kaori immediately released the wooden prison. Third elder's figure moved, arriving at Gale and Ata's side, preparing to leave. However, just as he took a step forward, he suddenly paused. He turned to look at Gale Xiao and hesitated for a moment before saying, Young master, Lord Clan leader misses you. If it's possible, please return to your family. With that, the third elder left with Gale selfless. He knew that it was impossible to take Gale Xiao Xiao away with Ming Jinyu around. Gale Xiao Xiao looked in the direction where third elder and Gale Wu had left. His expression was grave and his eyes were wet. Nietian could not help but frown when he saw Gale Little's actions. He could tell that Gale Little really wanted to return to his family, but for some reason, he couldn't. He did not know what had happened to Gale Xiao Xiao, so he could not say much. Lord Nietian, let's go. After a while, Gale Xiao Xiao calmed down and said with a chuckle, Gale Xiao Xiao, I have a friend whose life is in danger. He really needs the 9-demon firefox to save his life. Nietian looked at Gale Xiao Xiao and said solemnly, You better not play any tricks now. I won't. Gale Xiao Xiao, am an honest man. I never play tricks. Gale Xiao Xiao chuckled and pointed to the front. The person we're looking for is in a dilapidated courtyard in front. However, he has a bad temper. When you see him later, you better lower your stance. All right, Nietian nodded. He lifted the metal cage and walked forward. As long as he could save Sakura, Nietian could lower his stance at any time. After a while, a dilapidated courtyard appeared in front of Nietian and the rest. It looked as if it had been abandoned for a long time. It was unbelievable. What kind of person would live in such a place? Old thing, I'm back. Before entering the courtyard, Gale Xiao Xiao shouted loudly. He seemed to be very excited. Scram! However, in response to Gale Xiao Xiao was an angry roar. The person in the courtyard seemed to be very unhappy. The expressions of Nietian and the rest changed. They didn't expect the person inside to be so hot-tempered. Let me handle it. Gale Xiao Xiao waved his hand at Nietian, indicating for him to handle the situation in front of him. Old thing, I know you don't like outsiders coming here. However, they're my saviors. If not for them, I would have died in the hands of the Dark Moon Church, Gale Xiao Xiao said loudly as he pricked up his ears and waited for the person inside to respond. The person in the courtyard was quiet for a while. Then a voice was heard. That kid with the god-fiend vital embryo can come in. The others wait outside. The expressions of Nietian and the others changed in an instant upon hearing his words. They were hundreds of meters away from the courtyard, but the other party could actually sense that Nietian had the god-fiend vital embryo from such a distance. One had to admit that this perceptive ability was too strong. Nietian. Ming Jinyu's expression darkened as he looked at Nietian. He was obviously worried about the latter's safety. He felt that the person in the courtyard was definitely a powerhouse. If the other party wanted to harm Nietian, it would be terrible. Nietian frowned and thought for a while. Finally, he said, Elder Ming, please wait outside. I'll go in myself. In fact, he was also very nervous. However, in order to save Sakura, he had to take the risk. Elder Ming, don't worry. Although the old thing inside had a strange temper, he is definitely not a bad person. He won't do anything to Lord Nietian. Gale Xiao Xiao could see the worries of Nietian and the rest, and said with a chuckle. Ming Jinyu's eyes focused, but he finally nodded. Lord Nietian, let me out. At this moment, Gale Xiao Xiao chuckled and said. Nietian did not hesitate. He took out the key to the cage and let Gale Xiao Xiao out. Since Gale Xiao Xiao had already brought them here, there was no need to worry about him escaping. Lord Nietian, let's go in. Gale smiled at Nietian with a strange look in his eyes. Then, like a little monkey, he ran towards the small courtyard in front of him. Nietian let out a deep breath of foul air and followed after her. He was very curious as to who the mysterious person in the courtyard was. His perceptive ability was so terrifying that he could see through his demon god's nascent embryo from a few hundred meters away. Moments later, Nietian entered the small courtyard. Immediately, a fragrant aroma assailed his nostrils, making him feel refreshed and refreshed. Nietian's expression flickered as he discovered that he was actually in a huge garden. In front of him was a flower bed of bright purple and red flowers. Haha, kid with the demon god's nascent embryo. At this moment, a strange laugh was heard as a figure appeared in front of Nietian. Chapter 21-27. The man who had suddenly appeared in front of Nietian had a very strange appearance, which caused him to go blank. The person in front of him was short and small, about the size of a 10-year-old child. His entire body was covered in thick hair, even his face was covered. Furthermore, the person's palms and feet were very large. He was barefoot and looked like a young chimpanzee. Nietian stared blankly at her for a few seconds before his stiff expression finally changed. As he looked at the person was also sizing him up. Ha ha! It really is the god-fiend nascent embryo. I never thought that there would really be such a thing in this world. The person chuckled, his eyes sizing up Nyetian brazenly as if the latter was a monster. Who are you? Nyetian swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked in astonishment. The person in front of him was completely different from what he had imagined. Gale Xiao Xiao had said that the person in the yard was an eccentric person, and this person's earlier attitude. Nyetian had thought that the person in front of him was a proud and aloof old man. He had never imagined that the person in front of him would be such a comical person. Furthermore, this person's attitude was completely different from before he had entered the yard. His eyes were burning as if he wanted to do something to Nyetian. Young fellow, you came to my house and asked me who I am? The person's expression changed as if he was angry and asked coldly. Lord Nyetian, this is the man we've been looking for, the wise, mighty, and wise Grandmaster Zhuo. Gale Xiao Xiao seemed to have expected this reaction from Nyetian and chuckled as he introduced the person. Zhuo Master. Nyetian was so stunned that he could not even complete a simple sentence. He was not the kind of person who judged a book by its cover, but Gale Xiao Xiao calling this person Master Zhuo was one thing, but there was no need for the wise and brilliant person in front of him. However, Nyetian still maintained his composure. Since Gale Xiao Xiao had called this person master, it meant that he was extraordinary in some way. Putting everything else aside, just Master Zhuo's perceptive abilities were enough to astonish Nyetian. Young fellow, this master has thoroughly sensed your body. You are a monster. At this moment, Master Zhuo looked at Nyetian with a strange look in his eyes and chuckled. Any one of these things in your body is enough to make people go crazy. So many heaven-defying things have all gone to you. I really don't know how much sin you have committed to be able to have such great dogs, *T luck. Nyetian's face darkened at Master Zhuo's evaluation. He felt that this person's temper was indeed very strange. One moment, he was serious, the next moment he was playful. Moreover, the logic of his words was not something that ordinary people could understand. But he believed that Master Zhuo had seen many things. Brat, what are you doing here? Master Zhuo's face darkened as he asked coldly. Nyetian froze. He couldn't accept Master Zhuo's sudden change in attitude. Master Nyetian, you could just say it. Gale Xiao Xiao chuckled and signaled Nyetian with his eyes. Master Zhuo, this junior has come here to ask a favor. Nyetian nodded and said bluntly, this junior has a friend who had a blood-weeping sword infant planted in his body. He forcefully broke the seal and caused the blood-weeping sword infant to bite him. His martial body has been destroyed, and his soul is being devoured. His life is in danger. I heard that senior has... No, I don't have anything. Hurry up and leave. Master Zhuo interrupted Nyetian before he could finish. Nyetian froze and looked at Master Zhuo in confusion. He hadn't said what he was here for, but he immediately reacted. With Master Zhuo's abilities, he must have guessed everything. Old thing, what are you so angry for? Master Nyetian hasn't said anything yet, and you're already chasing me away? Gale Xiao Xiao seemed to have expected this reaction from Master Zhuo. He curled his lips and spoke in a displeased tone. Gale brat, he knows that I have the 9-demon fire fox. You told him, right? Master Zhuo was very straightforward. He stared at Gale Xiao Xiao and asked in a deep voice. He was very smart. As soon as Nyetian mentioned the blood-weeping sword infant's bite, he knew that the latter had come to find the 9-demon fire fox. As for how Nyetian knew that he had the 9-demon fire fox, it must have been from Gale's novel. So what if I told him? Gale Xiao Xiao didn't deny it. Master Nyetian saved my life. Shouldn't I repay him? Gale brat, that's your business. It has nothing to do with me. Master Zhuo responded Gale. Nothing to do with you? Gale Xiao Xiao's eyes widened, and then his body shook. Countless blood-weeping sword infants fell from his body. He pointed at Master Zhuo's nose and said, Old thing, you stole all these blood-weeping sword infants from me. I almost died at the hands of the Dark Moon Divine sect, and it was all because of you. Now that I'm in trouble, you wipe your ass and say it has nothing to do with you. Has your conscience been eaten by dogs? He had stolen the blood-weeping sword infants because of Master Zhuo's orders. Now that Master Zhuozh will want to cut ties with him. How could he not be angry? Niet Tian's expression froze when he saw the blood-weeping sword infants on the ground. There were at least a few hundred of them. He hadn't expected Gale Xiao Xiao to have so many blood-weeping sword infants on him. No wonder the Dark Moon Divine Sect had set up a trap to capture him. Gale brat, I saved you back then. You stole from me to repay your debt. Master said Gale angrily. Niet Tian watched from the side with a puzzled expression. He really couldn't guess the relationship between Gale Xiao Xiao and Master Zhuozh. Old thing, I don't care. You must help me in this matter. Otherwise, we'll go our separate ways. Gale Xiao Xiao was extremely angry. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and shouted, Go our separate ways? Master Zhuozh glared at him and shouted, You want to break up with me for this stinking brat? Have you forgotten that only I can undo the seal on you? Gale Xiao Xiao's face darkened. He wanted to say something else, but Niet Tian reached out and stopped him. Niet Tian really didn't want to listen to the two argue any longer. He walked up to Master Zhuozh and said with a dark gaze, Master Zhuozh, my friend doesn't have much time left. If you have the 9-demon fire fox, please take it out. You can make any request, and I'll agree to it. Even the things on me, as long as you want, you can take them at any time. Master Zhuozh looked at Niet Tian and felt the determination in the latter's eyes. He couldn't help but start and sink into thought. He had indeed discovered that Niet Tian had many good things on him, but he wasn't interested in any of them. Chapter 21-28. Master Zhuozh, have you thought of your conditions? Niet Tian couldn't help but urge when he saw that Master Zhuozh was silent for a long time. At this moment, he had already prepared himself for the worst. If Master Zhuozh wanted something from him, such as the supreme dragon vein, the flame of chaos, or the power of origin, he could give it to him. Niet Tian was willing to sacrifice some things to save Sakura. This was Niet Tian's greatest concession. If Master Zhuozh still didn't agree, then he only had one option left. Rob. Niet Tian had to obtain the 9-demon fire fox no matter what. He didn't care if he was the bad guy who robbed him openly. He had long since sensed that Master Zhuozh's aura wasn't strong, and he was certainly not strong enough to be Ming Jinyu's match. There was basically no danger if he just robbed him directly. However, he didn't want to do that. He wouldn't be the bad guy until he had no other choice. Kid, it looks like this friend of yours is very important to you. Master Zhuozh suddenly smiled and swept his gaze over Gale Little. Unfortunately, I'm not interested in any of the things you have on you. If you really want a 9-demon fire fox, I only have one condition. If you can do it, I will give it to you with both hands. What condition? Niet Tian's expression suddenly changed, his eyes burning with desire. Haha, it's very simple. Master Zhuozh suddenly smiled oddly and looked at Gale Little. Convince Gale Brat to acknowledge me as his master. Niet Tian's eyes trembled violently, his face full of disbelief. He thought he heard wrong. Master Zhuozh's condition was for Gale Little to acknowledge him as his master. Kid, you didn't hear wrong. If you can get Gale Little to acknowledge me as his master, I will give you the 9-demon fire fox, Master Zhuozh said smugly with a laugh. Niet Tian's expression changed, and he looked at Gale Little. Master Zhuozh's condition was truly beyond Niet Tian's expectations. If it wasn't for Gale Little's embarrassed expression, he would have thought that Master Zhuozh was playing with him. Old thing, whether I take you as my master or not is a matter between the two of us. It's not appropriate to drag Lord Niet Tian into this, is it? Gale Little looked embarrassed, clearly dissatisfied with Master Zhuozh's conditions. Kid, it's all up to you now, Master Zhuozh said to Niet Tian with a smile, completely ignoring Gale Little. Gale Xiao Xiao, help me this once. Niet Tian looked at Gale Xiao and did not say anything else as he begged. In Niet Tian's opinion, Grandmaster Zhuozh was someone with special abilities. There was nothing wrong with Gale taking him as his master. He could not understand why Gale Xiao Xiao was unwilling to acknowledge Zhuozh as his master. Moreover, Grandmaster Zhuozh had said that there was a seal in Gale Xiao Xiao's body that only he could undo. Under these circumstances, shouldn't Gale Little be Master Zhuozh's disciple? Old thing, must you toy with me like this? Gale Little looked troubled as he growled at Master Zhua in a low, cold voice. Gale Brat, this master is a person of status in the Forsaken Land. What's wrong with you acknowledging me as your master? Do you think this master would harm you? Master Zhua was much more serious now as he frowned. Old thing, acknowledging a master and taking in a disciple is something that both parties are willing to do. Since I don't want to acknowledge you as my master, why force me? Gale Little looked vexed. Moreover, with your status, who can't you take in as a disciple as long as you want? Why are you wasting your time on me? Because you're ugly and we look alike. Is it not okay? Master Zhuozhuo raised an eyebrow and said shamelessly. Tian and Gale Little were dumbfounded and speechless. Master Zhuozhuo's reason left them speechless. However, it had to be said that Gale Little and Master Zhuozhuo did look very similar. Their figures were about the same, but one resembled a monkey while the other resembled a gorilla. Gale Little, since you're not willing, I won't force you, Tian said when he saw that Gale Little was in a difficult position. He decided not to force it and would take the last option, rob. Since the soft approach didn't work, he could only use the hard way. All right, Gale Little suddenly called out and looked at Master Zhuozhuo. Old thing, since you want to take me as your disciple, I'll fulfill your wish. But don't regret it. Gale Little took a step forward and knelt in front of Master Zhuozhuo. Master, please accept this disciple's 3 kowtows. Bam, bam, bam. Before Tian could react, Gale kowtowed 3 times in a row, completing the apprenticeship ceremony in a simple and efficient manner. Tian stared blankly from the side and couldn't react for a long time. Gale Little had dawdled for so long, but he had suddenly become so straightforward. It is hard to accept. Master Zhuozhuo was also stunned. His old face froze for several seconds before he finally reacted and laughed heartily. Gale Brat, you've finally become this master's disciple. That's great, that's great, that's great. Tian exhaled deeply when he saw this, his expression relaxing quite a bit. Fortunately, Gale Little had been straightforward in acknowledging Gale Little as his master. Otherwise, he would have fallen out and openly robbed him. Old thing, you've gotten your wish. Hurry up and take out the 9-demon fire fox, Gale Little said coldly as he stood up. No problem, no problem. Master Zhuozhuo smiled happily. Wait here, I'll be there in a moment. With that, Master Zhuozhuo turned and left. Thank you, Gale Little. Tian thanked Gale Little sincerely. Without Gale Little, Master Zhuozhuo wouldn't have taken out the 9-demon fire fox. Lord Tian, don't thank me just yet. Wait a moment, I still have something I need your help with, Gale Little said indifferently with a laugh. Tian started and then nodded with a smile. Don't worry, as long as I can do it, I will definitely help you. Gale Little nodded and didn't say anything else. A moment later, Master Zhuozhuo's figure appeared again with a crimson demonic flower in his hand. It was as violent as fire and extremely bewitching. This is the 9-demon fire fox. Tian's eyes trembled as he looked at the demonic flower, his face burning with passion. Yes, Master Zhuo nodded. This 9-demon fire fox has been nurtured by this master for thousands of years. The 9-demon flames in the flower have already matured and are enough to suppress the backlash of the blood-weeping sword infant. Let your friend come out. This master will personally treat him. Many thanks. Tian's eyes lit up with joy. He quickly took out the 9 extremities and let Fat Cat, Sakura, and Rui Chinyu come out. 9-demon fire fox. The moment Fat Cat appeared and saw the 9-demon fire fox in Master Zhuozhuo's hand, her eyes trembled and she cried out. Chapter 21-29. Seeing Zhuozhuo's reaction, Tian couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Fat Cat's surprise towards the 9-demon fire fox was within Tian's expectations, but Zhuozhuo's reaction was beyond his expectations. Looking at Zhuozhuo's expression, he seemed to have discovered something on Tian, as if he recognized who Tian was. Could it be that Tian and this Master Zhuo know each other? Tian guessed in his heart, but his face had an expression of disbelief. Tian was from the 9 major realms, while Zhuozhuo was from the abandoned land. How could these two people know each other? Master Zhuozhuo, do you know Di Shi Tian? Nie Tian was puzzled and couldn't help but ask. No, I don't know him. Zhuozhuo was stunned at first, but he immediately reacted and shook his head. You don't know him? Nie Tian frowned. Zhuozhuo's reaction clearly showed that he knew Di Shi Tian, but looking at him, he seemed to be avoiding this point. Nie Tian didn't ask much and could only say, Master Di Shi Tian's soul is very unstable now, and he could be swallowed by the blood-weeping sword infant at any time. Please save him quickly. Okay. Zhuozhuo nodded slightly and said, I'm going to take him to the inner hall. You guys just wait here. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and his heart was filled with doubt. Zhuozhuo's reaction just now clearly showed that he knew Di Shi Tian, and now he was going to take the latter alone for treatment. This made Nie Tian a little worried. Fat, you go with Master Vivua. Nie Tian thought for a moment and said to Fat Cat. Okay. Fat Cat immediately understood and jumped on his Zhuozhuo's shoulder, saying, Big beard, let's go. Zhuozhuo glanced at Fat Cat, finally nodded, and took Di Shi Tian into the inner hall. Lord Nie Tian, don't worry. Although that old thing has a strange temper, he still has some ability. With him personally taking action, your friend will definitely be fine. Gale little thought that Nie Tian was worried, so he comforted him with a smile. I hope so. Nie Tian nodded, then looked at Rui Qinyu and asked with concern, Qinyu, are you all right? He knew that during this period of time, Rui Qinyu had been helping Sakura stabilize his soul with her 9-colored pupils, so she must be very tired. I'm fine. Rui Qinyu smiled faintly, but the tiredness in her eyes was hard to conceal. Lord Nie Tian, who is this beautiful lady? Is she your wife? Gale glanced at Rui Qinyu and asked with a chuckle. Nie Tian nodded slightly and held Rui Qinyu's hand tightly. You guys talk. Gale Xiao was rather tactful. After greeting him, he vanished into the flower bed with a flash. Nie Tian, who is he? Why does he look like this? Rui Qinyu lowered her voice and asked carefully after Gale Little had gone far away. He's a new friend of mine. His name is Gale Litley. Nie Tian smiled faintly and explained what had happened over the past few days. Rui Qinyu was shocked and said in a daze, The place we are in now is another world. Nie Tian nodded with a smile. According to Elder Ming, the top powerhouses in this world are infinitely close to the existence of sages. They're very scary. Rui Qinyu's eyes flickered, and she exclaimed, So sages really exist? Nie Tian nodded slightly. In the past, he had always doubted the existence of sages, but after coming to the Forsaken Land, he believed that sages really did exist. Afterwards, Nie Tian got Rui Qinyu to return to the 9 extremities to rest while he waited patiently outside. Sir Nie Tian. At this moment, Gale Little's figure appeared. He sniggered at Nie Tian as if he had something to say to Nie Tian. Gale Little, there's no need to be so polite. Just call me Nie Tian. Nie Tian suddenly thought of something and said, You said you needed my help with something. What is it? Before, Gale Little had told Nie Tian that he was not helping Nie Tian for nothing. He also needed Nie Tian's help with something. However, Gale Little did not say it directly. It was probably not something simple that he needed Nie Tian's help with. Boss Nie Tian, you're a laid-over god, right? Gale Little smiled strangely and changed the way he addressed Nie Tian from Sir Nie Tian to Boss Nie Tian. Yes. What is it? Nie Tian couldn't help but feel confused. He didn't know why Gale Little would suddenly ask about his strength. Boss Nie Tian, you're a laid-over god, but your battle prowess is definitely not that simple. Gale Little chuckled. Let me tell you, if you go all out, what level of battle prowess do you have? What? Do you have any enemies? Nie Tian couldn't help but smile. He thought for a moment and said, My true battle prowess is roughly equivalent to an early or mid-paramount god. That's strong. Gale Little was stunned. His eyes widened as he stared at Nie Tian in disbelief. Never in a million years could he have imagined that Nie Tian would be so strong that he could actually stand up to a mid-paramount god. Gale Little finally understood why Zhuozhuo had been so shocked the first time he had seen Nie Tian. Zhuozhuo had been through a lot, and this was the first time Gale Little had ever seen him so surprised. Gale Little had originally thought that Nietion's true battle prowess was comparable to a peak over god, or perhaps even an early paramount god. He had never imagined that Zhuozhuo would be even more terrifying than he had imagined. What he didn't know was that Nietion was intentionally hiding his true battle prowess. He didn't want Gale Little to be too shocked. Right now, Nietion could easily deal with a late paramount god with his 3 forbidden magics. In fact, he could even put up a fight against a peak paramount god. "What do you want me to help you with, Gale Little?" Nietion asked, puzzled. He had no idea what Gale Little was up to. "Help me capture someone." Gale Xiao's face darkened as a trace of anger flashed across his eyes as he spoke coldly. "Capture someone?" Nietion went blank for a moment before asking, "Who?" "A woman. A woman who ruined everything for me." Gale Little's eyes were cold and filled with intense, killing intent. Nietion frowned. From the look on Gale Little's face, it was obvious that he hated this woman. Gale Little, used to be the eldest son of the Gale clan," Gale Little said. "But now I've become a disgrace to the clan. Even my father doesn't like me. All of this was caused by that woman." Gale Little's eyes flickered. His gaze was terrifyingly cold, and his body was trembling slightly. "What did this woman do to you, Gale Little?" Nietion asked, looking at Gale Little. Zhuozhuo had told him that Gale Little had some sort of seal inside of him that only Zhuozhuo could undo. Zhuozhuo had also mentioned that he had saved Gale Little's life, and that Gale Little had secretly wept a blood-sword nascent soul to repay him. Chapter 2130. Boss Nietion, my situation is very complicated. I'll tell you about it later. Now, you just need to tell me if you're willing to help me. After a while, Gale Xiao calmed down and looked at Nietion with a burning gaze. He did not answer the latter's question, but asked in a deep voice. Nietion's gaze froze. He hesitated for a moment before finally nodding. Gale Xiao's unwillingness to tell him everything made him feel a little uncomfortable. However, Gale Xiao had helped him first. It was only right for him to agree to help. "Very well." Gale Xiao smiled faintly. A murderous glint flashed in his eyes as he said in a deep voice, "The person we want to capture is called enchantment." Enchantment. Nietion nodded slightly and committed this name to memory. "Gale boy, what are you doing?" At this moment, a scream suddenly sounded. Nietion and Gale Xiao turned at the same time. The person who appeared in front of them was none other than Master Zhuozhuo. "Master Zhuozhuo, how's Sakura?" Nietion asked hurriedly when he saw Zhuozhuo. However, Zhuozhuo ignored him. His eyes were fixed on Gale Xiao as he growled, "Gale Xiao, are you crazy to attack enchantment? Do you know the consequences of your actions?" "Old thing, I've already made up my mind. You don't need to persuade me anymore." Gale Xiao smiled faintly, his eyes extremely determined. "Sigh, what a sin." Zhuozhuo could not help but sigh painfully when he felt Gale Xiao's determination. Nietion had no time to care about Zhuozhuo and Gale Xiao. When he saw Fat Cat come out, he hurriedly asked, "Fat, how's Sakura?" "Don't worry, his soul is already stabilized. Next, we just need to reconstruct his body, and he will be able to be resurrected." Little Fat Cat chuckled. With a flash, it jumped onto Nietion's shoulder. With Zhuozhuo doing it personally and the 9 Demon Fire Fox, he could obviously control the backlash from the blood-weeping sword infant. "Gale Xiao, are you really going to do this?" Zhuozhuo looked at Gale Xiao with a dark gaze and asked again. "Yes." Gale Xiao nodded solemnly, clearly determined. "Master Zhuozhuo, what's going on? Who is this Insia?" Nietion was sure that Tion was safe, so he was no longer worried. He turned around and asked Zhuozhuo. Zhuozhuo hesitated for a moment, and finally said, "Insia is the eldest princess of the Inuit Empire, and was once Gale's little fiancée." Hearing Zhuozhuo's words, Nietion's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. Just now, Gale Xiao had said that this enchantment was the one who destroyed everything he had. And now, Zhuozhuo was saying that Insia was once Gale's little fiancée. Nietion couldn't help but think of himself. In his previous life, he was also ruined by a woman. Coincidentally, this woman was also his fiancée. It was as if his previous life's experience was shockingly similar to Gale Xiao Xiao's. No wonder Gale Xiao Xiao was so angry and hateful when he mentioned he'd attack you. Master Zhuozhuo, what happened to Gale Xiao Xiao? Nie Tian was very puzzled and asked with a frown. Zhuozhuo sighed and glanced at Gale Xiao Xiao. The latter did not say anything, obviously agreeing that he could say it. So Zhuozhuo no longer concealed it and said, Yinxia is the eldest princess of the Yingyue Empire and is known as the Yingyue Imperial Clan. She is a peerless monster that appears once in a million years. This woman and Gale Xiao Xiao were betrothed. Gale Xiao Xiao used to be the person with the strongest bloodline power in the Gale clan, and was also regarded as the pride of the clan. Gale Xiao Xiao and Yinxia were originally a match made in heaven. Unfortunately, on the night of their wedding, something unexpected happened. Their wedding was held in the Yingyue Imperial Palace. On the day of the wedding, all the great clans and forces of the Yingyue Empire were present. But on that day, Yinxia publicly accused Gale Xiao Xiao of having an affair with a concubine of the Yingyue Emperor. Moreover, Yinxia brought everyone to the bedroom in the backyard. Everyone saw Gale Xiao Xiao and the concubine hugging each other naked in the room. At this point, Zhuozhuo stopped and did not continue. Yinxia, she framed me. Suddenly, Gale Xiao Xiao roared and said, she cast a fiery soul terror curse on me, and I didn't know what I was doing at that time. Gale Little roared in rage, like a wild beast that had gone berserk. Nie Tian's eyes were dark, and his eyes were also filled with terrible anger. With his intelligence, he could naturally tell that there was something fishy about the whole thing. If Gale Xiao Xiao really had an affair with the emperor's concubine, why would he go to the concubine on the day of his wedding? It was obvious that everything was a trap set by Yinxia. Then, how was the matter resolved? Nie Tian waited for Gale Xiao Xiao to calm down before asking. Having an affair with the emperor's concubine was equivalent to making the emperor cuckold. Moreover, this cuckold had been made known to the entire empire. In this way, it would be very difficult to resolve the matter. Zhuozhuo smiled bitterly and said, Yinyu Emperor believed Yinxia's words and wanted to execute Gale Xiao Xiao, but the Gale clan was not weak in the Yu dynasty, and the clan leader of the Gale clan was sworn brothers with Yinyu Emperor. In the end, the Yu Imperial clan and the Gale clan each took a step back. Yinyu Emperor did not kill Gale Xiao Xiao, but used a more cruel method to torture him and planted the Yingyue evil seal on him. Yingyue evil seal. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, then glanced at Gale Xiao Xiao and said, Gale Xiao Xiao became like this because of this seal, right? Just now, Zhuozhuo said that Gale Xiao Xiao had the strongest bloodline power in the Gale clan, and his martial arts talent must be very strong. And Gale Xiao Xiao's 19th brother, Gale Wu, had appeared before, and the latter's appearance was worlds apart from Gale Xiao Xiao. This undoubtedly meant that Gale Xiao Xiao did not look like this before. Yes, Zhuozhuo nodded. The Yingyue evil seal is the bloodline seal of the Yu Imperial clan. It's very powerful. The Yingyue evil seal in Gale Xiao Xiao was personally planted by the Yinyu Emperor. When Gale Xiao Xiao first received the Yingyue evil seal, he almost died. I was the one who saved him. The reason why his appearance has become like this is all thanks to the Yin Moon evil seal. Moreover, the Yin Moon evil seal has greatly suppressed his talent and strength. Otherwise, given his talent, he would be a late paramount god at the very least, or even a peak paramount god. With that, Zhuozhuo looked over at Gale Xiao Xiao. Chapter 21:31. Nie Tian looked at the infuriated Gale Xiao with a gloomy expression. This Yinxia was indeed a terrifying woman. To think that she would frame her own fiancé in such a manner. Nie Tian couldn't help but think of Luo Zian. But in his opinion, Yinxia was more hateful than Luo Zian. Luo Zian's most frightening trait was her coldness and unscrupulousness. On the other hand, Yinxia was vicious and merciless. Gale Xiao was originally the young master of the Gale clan, the most promising person in the clan. But now he had fallen into such a state, all because of Yinxia. Nie Tian did not expect Gale Xiao to have such a tragic past. It turned out that Gale Xiao Zhao's mischievous and slippery face was all an act. After a while, Shui suddenly sighed and said with self-blame, "Actually, I'm also responsible for this matter. Master Zhuozhua, does this matter have anything to do with you?" Nye Tian was startled and could not help but ask. Shui shook his head and sighed. This old man did not teach well. Ever since I was 100 years old, people have been calling me a master. I didn't expect that after living for hundreds of thousands of years, I can't even teach a disciple. What do you mean? Nye Tian frowned, still a little confused. Insi, yeah, she is my disciple. Zhuozhua laughed, but it was a very bitter laugh. Nye Tian's body stiffened, and he was struck dumb. He did not expect Insienue to be Zhuo's disciple. At this time, he suddenly understood why Gale Xiao was unwilling to be Zhuo's disciple. Who would want to be the disciple of a person who had harmed their life? In this way, didn't Gale Xiao become Yin Xinyue's junior brother? Old thing, I know you feel guilty. You've done enough for me all these years. Without you, I wouldn't have lived to this day. Gale Xiao was much calmer now, and said with a serious expression, "What I've done is nothing compared to what you've experienced." Shui shook her head with a smile and said bitterly, "To think that I call myself a grandmaster, after so many years, I still haven't found a way to break the Inue evil seal. Old thing, in order to break the demonic mark of the lunar moon, you didn't hesitate to absorb the power of the demonic mark in my body. In the end, you ended up like this, neither human nor ghost. It must have been hard on you." Gale smiled bitterly, his eyes filled with gratitude. Zhuozhua originally had the appearance of a normal person, but in order to break the Dark Moon demonic seal, he had absorbed the demonic seal's power from Gale Xiao's body, and in the end, he had been struck by the Dark Moon demonic seal. Nye Tian was speechless and couldn't speak for a long time. It had to be said, this Zhuozhua was really courageous. He even dared to casually absorb the Yin Moon evil seal. "Gale, have you really made up your mind?" Zhuozhua looked at Gale Xiao and asked again. "Yes." Gale Xiao nodded solemnly and smiled bitterly. "I've waited long enough. If I don't take this gamble, I'm afraid I won't have the chance to take revenge again." Huh? Zhuozhua felt that Gale Xiao's mood was not right and couldn't help but frown. He immediately used his divine sense to examine Gale Xiao and directly exclaimed, "Gale, your demonic mark of the lunar moon can't be suppressed anymore." "Yes." Gale Xiao nodded. There was no fear on his face. Instead, he laughed and said, "Teacher, what should come is finally coming. I'm already very satisfied to be able to live for so long." Zhuozhua's face changed. There was a trace of tears in his eyes, and he couldn't finish the rest of his words. "Teacher, you've tried your best." Gale Xiao smiled faintly and immediately cheered up. He said loudly, "This is the last time. Let's go all out." "Okay." Zhuozhua's eyes trembled violently. He said, "Gale boy, since you've made up your mind, this old man will go crazy with you this time." Zhuozhua had already sensed that the demonic mark of the lunar moon in Gale Xiao's body could not be suppressed anymore. No wonder Gale Xiao wanted to attack Yin Jinue at this time. Nye Tian looked at the two people in front of him and couldn't help but smile. It seemed like he was going to do something big with this pair of master and disciple. "Gale, how confident are you in capturing Yin Attack Moon?" Zhuozhua looked at Gale Xiao and suddenly asked. Gale Xiao chuckled, then looked at Nye Tian and said, "With Boss Nye Tian here, I'm very confident that I can capture Yin Jinue alive." "Why?" At this time, Nye Tian couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment and asked, "Yin Xie is the eldest princess of the Inue Empire and is known as a monstrous genius. Her strength is definitely not weak. Moreover, with such a high status, she must have many experts protecting her. I'm only a late overgod, so it'll probably be difficult for me to approach her." Although Nye Tian had never met Yin Xinyue, nor did he know what level of power the Inue Empire was. But from the conversation between Zhuozhua and Gale Xiao, he could tell that Yin Xinyue and the Inue Empire were definitely very powerful. It was really difficult for Gale Xiao to capture Yin Xinyue alive against such a powerful force. Gale, you already have a plan in mind, right? Zhuozhua's eyes narrowed as she asked. Gale Xiao nodded, then looked at Nie Tian and said, Boss Nie Tian, let me tell you about the Yinhua Empire first. This is a behemoth-level force. In the entire abandoned land, the forces that can contend with the Yinhua Empire definitely don't exceed the fingers on one hand. So powerful. Nie Tian's eyes couldn't help but tremble when he heard Gale Xiao Zhao's words. He knew that the peak experts of the abandoned land were existences infinitely close to saints. Since the Yinhua Empire was one of the top 5 peak forces in the abandoned land, didn't that mean that there were peak experts infinitely close to saints hidden in this empire? With Nie Tian's current strength, he couldn't even imagine how terrifying such peak experts were. Gale Xiao nodded slightly, then smiled strangely and said, It's absolutely impossible for us to contend with the Yinhua Empire head-on. But if we want to capture Yin Xianhua, it's not impossible. What do you mean? Nie Tian asked after being stunned for a moment. Dark Azura Field. Gale Xiao smiled mysteriously and said a name. When Zhuozhua heard this name, she was stunned at first, then immediately understood something. She said in astonishment, You mean Yin Xianhua has come to the Dark Azura Field? Yes. Gale Xiao nodded solemnly and said, After all, I've been with Yin Xianhua for a long time. I know that she has a great hobby, and that is gambling. So, she often comes to the Dark Azura Field. This place can be said to be her favorite. Although her whereabouts are very secretive every time she comes, I have a special method to know her whereabouts. But I have a special method to track her whereabouts, and I'm very sure that she is in the Dark Night Azura Field. Dark Azura Field? What kind of place is that? Nie Tian was confused and couldn't help but ask. Chapter 21:32. The upper class gambled with money, while the lower class gambled with their lives. Nie Tian's eyes flickered when he heard this. He could roughly guess what kind of place the Dark Night Azura Field was. The Dark Night Azura Field is a place of combat. But once you enter, you must fight to the death. At this moment, Gale Xiao began to explain, the Dark Azura Field is an extremely strange place. Usually, only overgods are allowed to enter. If you're a paramount god, you'll have to have a special status to enter. However, if your strength is at the peak of the paramount god level, you won't be able to enter even if you have a special status. I heard that the power behind the Dark Night Azura Field is very powerful, so everyone who comes here has to abide by the rules. Nie Tian gradually understood something. He smiled faintly and said, Gale Little, you're saying that we should capture Yin Xianhua in the Dark Night Azura Field, right? That's right. Gale Little nodded with a smile. Yin Xianhua has a very noble status. Her strength should be below the peak of the paramount god level, so she can enter and exit the Azura Field at will. However, those experts protecting her in the dark will not be able to enter the Azura arena. That's why we have the highest chance of success. Nie Tian nodded and said, In that case, it's indeed possible. The Dark Night Azura Field only allowed warriors below the peak of the paramount god level to enter. This rule was simply too good. It was as if it was specially prepared for Nie Tian. Considering his current level of strength, he could even fight a late paramount god. He was definitely a peak existence in the Dark Night Azura Field. Zhuo frowned and said doubtfully, With just the two of you, even if Yin Xianhua doesn't have any powerful guard with her, you won't be able to capture her, right? According to his estimation, Yin Xianhua should have the strength of a mid or late paramount god. Nie Tian and Gale Little were both late paramount gods. How could they fight Yin Xianhua? Gale Little chuckled and pointed outside the courtyard. Of course we're a bit weak, but there's a powerful brother outside. Ah, Elder Ming and the others are still outside. Nie Tian suddenly exclaimed. He suddenly remembered that Ming Jianyu and Mizuhara Kaori were still waiting outside. Zhuo also suddenly remembered and said, There are 2 people outside. Let them in. Ming Jianyu and Mizuhara Kaori entered the courtyard. An apologetic expression appeared on Nie Tian's face. He felt a bit embarrassed to have kept them waiting outside for so long. Gale Little, are you saying that Mizuhara Kaori will come with us to the Dark Night Azura Field? Nyetian immediately realized that Gale Little was referring to Mizuhara Kaori. Gale nodded with a smile and said, I've already witnessed Brother Shuei's strength. As long as he enters the Azura field with us, he will definitely be able to capture In Sienua alive. Previously, Gale Xiao had witnessed with his own eyes how Mizuhara Kaori had defeated his 19th brother, Gale Inata, with a single move. Therefore, he was very confident in the latter's strength. Nyetian, what are you talking about? Ming Jinyu and Mizuhara Kaori were still stunned. Nyetian, what are you talking about? Ming Jinyu and Mizuhara Kaori were still stunned. They had no idea what was going on. Nyetian nodded slightly and went on to explain everything in brief. It must be very dangerous for you to enter the Azura field. Do you need me to follow? Ming Jinyu asked with a frown. No. Gale Little waved his hand. Elder Ming, you're too powerful. If you follow, you'll attract attention. Ming Jinyu frowned. He thought about it and nodded in agreement. Let's not waste time. Let's go now, Nyetian said directly. He did not like to delay. All right, Gale Little nodded. His eyes shone with unconcealable passion. Nyetian, which was suddenly called out to Nyetian. Tian needs to reconstruct his body. This master would like to help him reconstruct it. Is that possible? Sure. Nyetian was stunned for a moment before nodding. He was just thinking about Tian's body reconstruction. Now that Zhuozhuo brought it up, he naturally agreed. Since you agree, why don't you give me the Dragon Spring Vein? Zhuozhuo nodded with a smile. Nyetian was stunned. He did not expect Zhuozhuo to know that he had the Dragon Spring Vein. Nyetian, given the Dragon Spring Vein. At this time, Little Fat Cat smiled helplessly and said, This big, bearded man's perception is too terrifying. In front of him, you have no secrets at all. Nyetian's face stiffened. He took out the Dragon Spring Vein without hesitation. At the same time, he took out another item, the Ink Jade Dragon Sword. Master Zhuozhuo, there is a soul sealed in this sword. Her name is Jian Qingqi. She is someone very important to me. Please help me undo the seal, and then help Elder Jian reconstruct his body. Nyetian handed the Dragon Spring Vein and the Ink Jade Dragon Sword to Zhuozhuo. He knew that Zhuozhuo's methods were brilliant. It was more suitable for him to reconstruct the body than Fat Cat. All right, Zhuozhuo did not decline. Don't worry. Before long, this master will definitely let you see a brand new Tian and a brand new Jian Qingqi. Thank you, Grandmaster. Nyetian smiled faintly and bowed slightly to express his gratitude. Then, Nyetian and the others did not linger. They immediately left the courtyard and headed for the dark Azura field. Capturing the eldest princess of the Inuit Empire is an earth-shattering matter. My courtyard is going to be lively. Zhuozhuo looked at the figures of Nyetian and the others and shook his head. If Nyetian and the others succeeded in capturing Insia, it would definitely alarm countless forces. At that time, all the spearheads would probably be pointed at Zhuozhuo's courtyard. At this moment, Zhuozhuo frowned. A jade token suddenly appeared in her hand. She directly crushed it, and a sword chi gushed out, instantly dissipating in the air. Ming Jinyu's eyes narrowed when he saw this. Of course, he could not tell who Zhuozhuo's action was to send a message to. Judging from Zhuozhuo's expression, it seemed to be a message for help. Ming Jinyu's face darkened slightly. He had a faint sense of foreboding. Then, Zhuozhuo greeted Ming Jinyu and entered the inner hall. She began to use the Dragon Spring Vein to reconstruct Tian and Jian Qingqi's bodies. On the other side, after Nyetian and the others left the courtyard, they headed straight for the Dark Azura Field. The Dark Azura Field was located in the center of Dark Night City. About a few minutes later, the figures of Nyetian and the others appeared outside the Dark Azura Field. Nyetian looked at the huge circular building in front of him. He did not pay too much attention to it. Instead, he secretly activated the holographic divine patterns to sense the aura fluctuations in the surroundings. As the holographic divine patterns slowly unfolded, Nyetian's expression changed again and again. In the end, it almost became stiff. He sensed that there were many peak supreme god experts within 10,000 meters of him. There were actually no less than 100 of them. Moreover, there were many hidden experts whose auras were no weaker than the peak experts of the 9 major realms. The fact that there were so many experts in this small Dark Knight Azura field was beyond Nietion's expectations. Chapter 21:33. Nietion had never imagined that there would be so many experts hiding in the Dark Knight Azura arena. He was starting to worry about how they were going to get out of here once they captured Insienwe. Boss Nietion, these people are the guards of important figures, Gale Xiao said with a smile. Gale Xiao could sense the presence of these experts, and he chuckled. Insienwe is usually escorted by 4 peak paramount gods. However, they can't enter the Azura arena. They can only hide outside. Nietion nodded, calming himself. Let's go in. All right. Gale Xiao nodded, and the 3 of them entered the Dark Knight Azura arena. At the entrance, Mizuhara Kaori was blocked, but Gale Xiao flashed a command medallion, and the guards let her through. She was a late paramount god, which was the limit of what was allowed in the Dark Knight Azura arena. If she were a peak paramount god, even if Gale Xiao flashed his command medallion, she wouldn't be able to enter. As soon as the 3 of them entered the Dark Knight Azura arena, they sensed a strong stench of blood. Outside the Azura arena, countless people were shouting and yelling in a frenzy. In the Azura arena, there were several cultivators fighting to the death, all of them looking like fiends who wanted nothing more than to tear each other to shreds. Boss Nietion, Brother Shui, this is a low-level Azura battle arena. Each arena has 10 people fighting each other, and only 1 person can walk out alive, Gale Little said as he led Nietion and Mizuhara Kaori deeper into the arena. Nietion scanned the area with his divine sense and saw that the cultivators on the Azura battle arenas were all early or middle overgods. They weren't very powerful. Under normal circumstances, only overgods are allowed to fight on the Azura arena. But if there are any important figures who want to have some fun, that's fine too. As Gale Xiao walked, he introduced, if the young masters and young masters of those aristocratic families or factions are angry, they can step onto the Azura battle platform. They're all paramount gods, and many of them are mid or late paramount gods. Beating these martial slaves on the Azura battle platform is a complete torture. These young masters are only looking for entertainment. They don't see martial slaves as human beings at all. They kill as many as they want and however they want. Nietion listened to Gale Xiao's words and looked over. As expected, he saw many people on the Azura battle platform with a blood mark on their faces. It was the word slave. These people are all martial slaves? Nietion frowned and asked. Yes. Gale Xiao nodded and said, most of them are martial slaves. Some were raised by large factions since young. Some were reduced to slaves because they did something wrong, and many are prisoners of war from enemy countries. There is also an extremely small number of people who willingly went up on stage for the sake of benefits. As Nietion listened to Gale's introduction, he looked at the Azura battle platforms around him. His face turned gloomy. The Dark Knight Azura arena was even crueler than he had imagined. These martial slaves were all overgod experts. It should be noted that an overgod would basically be an overlord in any of the 9 realms. But in this place, these overgods were even worse than dogs. Boss Nietion, we're here. At this moment, Gale's tiny figure suddenly came to a halt as he looked at the massive Azura battle platforms before him. Nietion glanced over at the Azura battle platforms and discovered that they were much larger than the others. Furthermore, there were very few people around them, and there were only a few VIP booths in the viewing area. What is this place? Nietion asked with a frown. This is the VIP section of the Dark Knight Azura arena. Everyone with status comes here to watch the battles. Many people use martial slaves to gamble. Gale Xiao's eyes were fixed on the Azura battle platforms, as if he were searching for something. Martial slaves bet? Nietion was taken aback. He didn't understand. Both sides will send out a martial slave. Whoever's martial slave wins will be the winner. Their bets are usually very high. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to afford it at all. Gale explained softly as his eyes swept across the Azura battle platforms one after another. Nietion nodded slightly. These young masters were really cruel. They didn't treat martial slaves as humans, but as dogs. Found it. Gale Xiao seemed to discover something. His eyes trembled as he exclaimed. Found what? Nietion was taken aback. He followed Gale Xiao's gaze and saw two martial artists engaged in a fierce battle on a huge Azura battle platform. Apart from that, there was nothing else wrong. Boss Nietion, do you see that female martial artist? She's Insia's martial slave. Gale Xiao pointed at a female martial artist on the Azura battle platform and said excitedly. Nietion went blank for a moment before asking, How did you know? Insia is a woman, so she likes to raise female martial slaves. Moreover, she has a habit of tying a green ribbon around the neck of each of her martial slaves, Gale Xiao said solemnly. He knew Insia very well. Nietion's eyes trembled. Sure enough, he found a green ribbon around the female martial artist's neck. What do we do now? Nietion became cold and asked. Since Insia's martial slave had appeared, it meant that she must be here. However, there were many VIP rooms in the viewing area, and each VIP room was protected by an array, so it was impossible to sense anything inside. Nietion and the others obviously couldn't go from VIP room to VIP room, so the next biggest problem was to determine which VIP room Insia was in. No hurry. Let's see the result of this match first. Gale Xiao was very calm at the moment, with a strange smile on his face. At this moment, he already had a plan in mind. If Insia didn't show up, he would let Nietion ascend to the Azura fighting platform. With Nietion's strength, he could absolutely crush all the martial slaves. As long as Nietion showed his super strength, it would definitely attract Insia's attention. Insia was very interested in martial slaves with extraordinary talent. At this time, the battle on the Azura fighting platform had already come to an end. The martial slave with the green ribbon was killed by his opponent. Next match. Without the slightest pause, the black-clothed referee on the Azura fighting platform shouted coldly, without even looking at the next match. Then, an iron cage appeared in the sky above the Azura fighting platform. In the iron cage stood a female martial slave with a green ribbon around her neck. Obviously, after Insia's martial slave was killed, she was very dissatisfied and sent another martial slave. At this moment, Nietion looked at the female martial slave in the cage. His pupils suddenly shrank, and he screamed. Then his whole body froze as if he was petrified. Chapter 21:34. Nieyuro. The instant Nietion saw the appearance of the martial slave in the iron cage, his expression changed drastically. He felt as if there was a boom in his head as he froze on the spot. He could not believe his eyes. The martial slave in the iron cage was actually Nieyuro. It was actually his ninth sister, Nieyuro. Nietion was petrified on the spot, unable to react for a full 10 seconds. He had never imagined that Nieyuro would appear here, and as a martial slave at that. Wasn't Nieyuro with Sacred Master Xianlong and I jamming to search for the Dragon Spring vein? Why was she here? Where was N.I. jamming? Where was Di-Shi? In an instant, Nietion came to his senses. His mind was in a mess, and the blood in his body was surging wildly. His eyes slowly turned bloodshot, like a wild beast that was about to go berserk at any moment. Boss Nietion, what's wrong? Gale Xiao suddenly sensed that something was wrong with Nietion's expression. He quickly turned around and could not help but exclaim in shock. Nietion, are you all right? Mizuhara Kaori also sensed that something was wrong and looked at Nietion in confusion. Nietion did not speak. His eyes were like those of a wild beast, staring fixedly at the iron cage that was slowly descending from the sky. Boss Nietion, do you know that martial slave? Gale Xiao immediately reacted and asked in astonishment. She is my younger sister, Nietion said in a low voice. The blood in his body was almost boiling, and he was about to rush out. Younger sister, Gale Xiao cried out strangely. His small eyes were wide open. and his expression was extremely astonished. He had never imagined that the female martial slave with the green ribbon around her neck was actually Nie Tian's younger sister. This sudden turn of events had greatly exceeded his expectations. No wonder Nie Tian's expression had changed so suddenly. It was as if he had become a completely different person. Mizuhara Kaori was also stunned, her face filled with disbelief. He remembered that Nie Tian was from one of the 9 realms, wasn't he? Why would he encounter his younger sister in the land of the Forsaken? Gale grabbed Nie Tian's arm and said in a low voice, "Boss Nie Tian, don't be rash. There are many experts from the Shiraba hiding here. If you make a move now, you'll definitely draw them out." Outsiders weren't allowed to enter the Dark Knight Azura arena, but there were plenty of peak paramount gods lurking in the shadows. These people were from the Azura field and would not appear under normal circumstances. However, if someone dared to violate the Azura arena's rules, they would appear and kill without the slightest hesitation. However, if anyone dared violate the rules of the Azura domain, Gale was a little worried that Nie Tian would be impulsive and rush onto the Azura battle platform. However, at this moment, Nie Tian acted as if he hadn't heard Gale Xiaoxiao's words and said coldly, "Gale Xiaoxiao, I want to enter the Azura battle arena." At this moment, Nie Tian was already restraining himself. If not, he would have already rushed over. This? Gale was stunned for a moment, and his eyes trembled violently. He said anxiously, "Boss Nie Tian, please wait for a moment. Just a moment." With that, Gale's tiny figure moved and turned to leave. Anyone who ascended to the Azura arena must first greet the people of the Azura arena. Otherwise, it would be challenging the dignity of the Azura arena. Nie Tian forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. His eyes were fixed on the Azura battle platform, ready to make a move at any moment. The only reason he could remain calm at this moment was because Nie Yuro wasn't in any danger. Otherwise, he would have rushed over long ago. And at this moment, the cage opened and Nie Yuro walked out. Her watery eyes looked around, and she appeared to be extremely frightened. Another little girl? Just at this moment, a berserk voice rang out from below. Shortly after, a figure appeared and roared furiously, "Die!" The violent voice came from the other martial slave on the Azura battle platform. This person was extremely ferocious, not giving Nie Yuro any chance to catch her breath. He directly punched out, a terrifying fist shadow shooting towards her. Nie Yuro's eyes trembled slightly. She immediately reacted. A pair of cicada's wings appeared on her back, and she dodged to the side for tens of meters. But unfortunately, she was still a little too slow. Boom! A terrifying fist shadow flew past like a flood dragon, and a violent force bloomed in the space. Pung! In the next moment, a muffled sound rang out. Nie Yuro's figure was directly sent flying. She dodged the fist shadow head-on, but was directly sent flying by the aftershock of the fist shadow. Roa! This sudden scene caused Nie Tian's eyes to narrow. The suppressed rage in his heart could no longer be controlled. With a roar, a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back. With a ferocious stomp of his feet, his entire person became like a beam of light, exploding outwards. Nie Tian's figure was extremely fast. In a blink of an eye, he appeared in the air above the Azura battle platform. With a wave of his hand, a soft yet vigorous energy appeared, enveloping Nie Yuro. Nie Yuro was in midair when she suddenly felt a gentle force appear, allowing her to stabilize her body. Big Brother Nie Tian. Abruptly, Nie Yuro raised her head and saw a familiar face appear in the air. Her eyes instantly became hot, and tears of disappointment flowed down her cheeks. She couldn't believe her own eyes. It felt like a dream, but the face in front of her was so clear, so real. Even the aura and eyes were so familiar and real. Everything told Nie Yuro that she wasn't dreaming. Roa! Nie Tian's silhouette flickered, directly appearing beside Nie Yuro, stretching out his hand to support her. Big Brother Nie Tian, is that really you? Nie Yuro's eyes trembled. She still couldn't believe the scene in front of her. Roa, it's fine now. Nie Tian nodded his head, his eyes calm and solemn. "With me here, I won't let anyone hurt you." The brother and sister pair had never imagined that the next time they would meet again, it would be here, under such circumstances. What is he doing? At this time, the crowd around the Azura battle platform finally reacted. Their faces were filled with bewilderment. Where did this smelly brat come from? He actually dares to step onto the Azura battle platform? Is he courting death? In the next instant, the judge of the Azura battle platform reacted. His eyes were fixed on Nietian as he roared in anger. Nietian's appearance was too sudden. The judge only reacted now. Without any warning whatsoever, Nietian had barged into the Azura battle platform. That was a violation of the rules of the Azura arena. It was a blatant provocation to the Azura arena. Even as the words left the judge's mouth, dozens of auras appeared in the area. The Azura guards hiding in the shadows were already beginning to stir. All it would take was a single word from the judge, and the Azura guard would appear and kill Nietian. The Azura guards of the Dark Azura arena were no ordinary experts. Each and every one of them had the strength of a peak paramount god. Any one of them could kill Nietian. Chapter 2135. Countless gazes stared at Nietian and Nyeyuro from the Azura arena. Their gazes were filled with doubt, surprise, but most of it was viciousness. Nietian's sudden appearance had interrupted the battle on the Azura arena, which displeased them very much. Brother Nietian, Nyeyuro could not help but secretly tighten her grip on Nietian's hand when she sensed the hostile gazes. "I'm here. It'll be fine," Nietian said indifferently. He did not say anything else. "Brat, do you know that you're provoking the Azura arena right now?" The black-clothed referee spoke again at this moment. The killing intent in his eyes became even heavier. "So what?" Nietian suddenly raised his head. His eyes were as deep as water. There was no fear at all. Instead, he was filled with battle intent. The referee was stunned. Clearly, he had never thought that Nietian would be so arrogant. "Brat, there's only one outcome for provoking the Azura arena, and that's death." Afterwards, the referee's eyes trembled, and he bellowed out furiously. With that, the surrounding space trembled slightly. Several dozen black-clothed figures appeared in the sky. Their presences surged as if they were tangible killing intent. They locked onto Nietian. The Azura hidden guards had appeared. The Azura hidden guards. The crowd all cried out when they saw the sudden appearance of the black-clothed figures. They were extremely shocked. Most people only knew that the Dark Knight Azura arena was protected by the Azura guards, but very few people had actually seen the Azura guards. The Azura arena had existed in Dark Knight City for several 100,000 years. There was basically no one who dared to provoke it. As a result, most of the time, the Azura hidden guards were just for show. However, who would have thought that the Azura hidden guards would actually appear because of a late overgod? "Brat, who knows how long it's been since someone dared to provoke the Azura arena? Your appearance is very timely. It'll give the Azura hidden guards something to do." The referee smiled coldly. Afterwards, he signaled the Azura hidden guards to take action. Outside the Azura battle platform, beads of sweat formed on Mizuhara Kori's forehead as she witnessed this scene. She was clearly extremely nervous. He could sense that these Azura shadow guards were all peak paramount gods. If it was just one Shura shadow guard, he might have been able to handle it. But there were so many of them, and it was impossible for him to handle them. Wait. Just as the Azura hidden guards were about to make their move, a voice rang out. A figure flashed past like a bolt of lightning and appeared on the Azura battle platform. Everyone was stunned for a moment, thinking that they were seeing things. However, when they calmed down, they saw a short and small figure standing in midair. Nietian narrowed his eyes and looked at the person who suddenly appeared. It was none other than Gale Xiao Xiao. The black-clothed referee was stunned. He looked at Gale Xiao Xiao and asked in a cold tone, "And who are you?" At that moment, the judge felt very strange. Gale Xiao Xiao's speed was too fast, which surprised him. In his opinion, other than the Gale clan, no one could be so fast. "I am a young master of the Gale clan, Gale Xiao Xiao." Gale Xiao Xiao puffed out his chest and said loudly, "Gale Xiao Xiao." Hearing this name, Everyone's eyes widened. They stared at Gale Xiao Xiao, unable to believe their eyes. Because of the incident where he made the Moon Emperor a cuckold, Gale Xiao Xiao's name had spread far and wide. Many people had never seen Gale Xiao Xiao in person, but they knew his name. Hearing Gale Xiao Xiao's identity, the crowd couldn't help but start discussing. Is he Gale Xiao Xiao? Why does he look like this? How could he seduce the Moon Emperor's concubine? What a weirdo. Back then, he almost married the eldest princess of the Moon Empire. Who would have thought that he would look like this? What an eye-opener. The crowd discussed among themselves, each more vile than the last. However, Gale Xiao Xiao didn't care. Since he had revealed his identity, he was already prepared. Brat, do I have to believe you just because you say you are Gale Xiao Xiao? The black-clothed judge sneered with a strange smile in his eyes. Although he sounded doubtful, he already believed most of it. Gale Xiao Xiao's speed was very fast. This alone proved that he was from the Gale clan. The judge had heard that Gale Xiao Xiao was marked by the Moon Emperor, so it wasn't strange for him to look like this. Do you believe me? Gale Xiao Xiao smiled faintly. Then, a black jade appeared in his hand and shone in front of the judge. Gale Mystic Jade. The judge exclaimed in shock when he saw the token in Gale Xiao Xiao's hand. Gale Mystic Jade. Almost at the same time, the crowd also exclaimed in shock. They hadn't seen the Gale Mystic Jade before, but they knew that it was the secret token of the Gale clan. Rumor had it that the Gale clan only had 2 pieces of the Gale Mystic Jade. One was in the hands of the Patriarch, and the other was in the hands of the young master. Everyone knew that the person who obtained the Gale Mystic Jade could ask the Gale clan to do one thing for them. Nobody expected that Gale Xiao Xiao would take out the Gale Mystic Jade to prove his identity. Now, do you believe my identity? Gale Xiao Xiao's eyes narrowed as he spoke in a low voice. Since you have the Gale Mystic Jade, it means that you are Gale Xiao Xiao. The black-clothed referee laughed and said, Everyone says that Gale Xiao Xiao is the shame of the Gale tribe. I didn't expect you to have the Gale Mysterious Jade in your hands. It seems like you've kept your position as the young master. My position in the Gale clan has nothing to do with you. Gale Xiao Xiao heard the sarcasm in the judge's voice and replied, indeed, it has nothing to do with me. The black-clothed judge sneered. His face sank as he said, Young Master Stormwind, even if you're still the young lord of the Stormwind clan, you're challenging the Azura Arena by forcing your way into the Azura Arena. I know what I'm doing, Gale Xiao Xiao replied Gale coldly. Then, he turned to Tian and said, He's my friend. Just now, he broke the rules of the Azura Arena by trespassing on the Azura Arena. However, according to my knowledge, the Azura field has another rule. Anyone who challenges the Azura King can set foot in the Azura Arena at any time, right? The judge suddenly became stunned when he heard Gale Xiao mention the Azura King. Afterwards, he sneered and said loudly, Just him, a piece of trash late over God, wants to challenge the Azura King? What? Did I hear wrong? The silver-haired kid wants to challenge the Azura King? At the same time, the surrounding people cried out as well. They all looked at Tian strangely and mocked him coldly. Chapter 21:36. Is the Azura King very terrifying? Tian could not help but murmur when he saw the reactions of the people around him. Of course, he knew that Gale Xiao Xiao was trying to save him. However, Gale Xiao Xiao's challenge to the Azura King caused the surrounding people to look at him with disdain. This made Tian rather worried. It was as if the Azura King was an extremely terrifying existence. This reckless brat actually wants to challenge the Azura King. He's looking to die. In the next moment, the crowd erupted into laughter. They all looked at Tian like he was a joke. To them, it was indeed a joke for a late over god to challenge the Azura King. Are you done laughing? Tian frowned. He really could not hold it in any longer. He suddenly took a step forward and roared out furiously. A terrifying sword aura erupted around him. The thunderous roar caused the entire place to fall silent. Everyone's eyes trembled, and their gazes towards Tian clearly changed. The sword aura that Tian had released was extremely terrifying. It had completely exceeded everyone's expectations. No one had thought that the ordinary-looking Nietion could actually erupt with such a terrifying sword aura. At this moment, the black-clothed referee was stunned as well. He looked at Nietion and laughed. So you're a swordsman who has reached this state of selflessness. You do have some strength. His tone suddenly changed when he reached there. He said scornfully, but you're still looking to die if you want to challenge the Azura King with this bit of strength. Whether I'm looking to die or not is my problem. It has nothing to do with you. Nietion frowned and said coldly, all you need to answer is, do you allow me to challenge the Azura King? He did not know who the Azura King was, but facing him was much better than facing several dozen Azura Shadow Guards. Brat, looks like you have no idea what challenging the Azura King means. The referee looked at Nietion and suddenly smiled. He said, the Azura King is not a person, but a title. Challenging the Azura King means becoming the Azura King. What do you mean? Nietion was stunned. He really didn't know what it meant to challenge the Azura King. Humph, the black-clothed judge sneered and said, to challenge the Azura King, you have to stand on the Azura battle platform and accept the challenges of countless martial slaves. Any martial slave can challenge you, and they can challenge you at the same time. In other words, you might have to face several or even dozens of martial slaves at the same time. With your strength alone, can you handle dozens of martial slaves at the same time? Nietion's gaze focused, and then he smiled and said indifferently, so this is what it means to challenge the Azura King. Looks like I thought too highly of this matter. When the black-clothed referee saw Nietion's reaction, his face sank and his eyes turned cold. He didn't expect that Nietion wasn't showing fear at this moment, but pride. It was as if Nietion didn't care about the martial slave's challenges at all. Indeed, with Nietion's current strength, let alone dozens of martial slaves at the same time, he wouldn't be afraid even if several hundred martial slaves attacked him at the same time. This was because these martial slaves were all over-god experts. Without any exaggeration, with the strength of Nietion's martial body, as long as he activated the astral soul shield and stood there without moving, no matter how many martial slaves there were, they wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Brat, looks like you're more arrogant than I thought. The black-clothed referee smiled coldly. His eyes were filled with killing intent. I'm arrogant because I have the right to be arrogant. Nietion smiled faintly and raised his eyebrows. He said, now answer me. Do you agree to challenge the Azura King? After understanding what it meant to challenge the Azura King, Nietion felt much more at ease. His only worry was that the black-clothed referee wouldn't give him the chance to challenge the Azura King. I agree, of course I agree. The black-clothed referee smiled coldly and said, however, to challenge the Azura King, you need to take out something good as collateral. Brat, do you have anything good on you? Nietion's eyes narrowed. Just as he was about to speak, Gale Xiao spoke first. Gale Mystic Jade, is this enough? Gale Xiao raised the Gale Mystic Jade in his hand and asked Gale Xiao coldly. Gale Xiao, you're willing to use the Gale Mystic Jade as collateral? The black-clothed referee was stunned. He stared at the Gale Mystic Jade with reddened eyes. He never imagined that Gale Xiao would take out the Gale Mystic Jade as collateral. The so-called collateral was a method to provoke others to challenge the Azura King. If someone killed the person challenging the Azura King, they would obtain the item as collateral. For example, if someone killed Nietion, they would obtain the Gale Mystic Jade. The Gale Mystic Jade was a secret order of the Gale clan. As long as one obtained it, they could request the Gale clan to do one thing for them unconditionally. The Gale clan was an extremely powerful clan in the Forsaken Land. For Gale Xiao to take out the Gale Mystic Jade as collateral would undoubtedly entice many people to challenge Nietion. The reason why Gale Xiao did this was because he was worried that the black-clothed referee wouldn't agree to Nietion challenging the Azura King. Thus, he had to take out something tempting enough as collateral. Do you accept the Gale Mystic Jade as collateral? Gale Xiao didn't want to waste his breath and asked coldly. The Gale Mystic Jade as collateral. Of course, the Dark Knight Azura Arena will accept it. The black-clothed referee smiled and waved his hand. The Azura guards around him immediately retreated. Gale Xiao nodded and turned to stand beside Nie Tian. He whispered, "Boss Nie Tian, challenging the Azura King isn't as simple as you think. You might encounter an unexpected opponent." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He didn't quite understand what Gale Xiao was trying to say. Weren't all his opponents martial slaves? Could it be that someone stronger would appear? Gale Xiao didn't say much and turned to leave. However, Nie Tian pulled him back and said, "Let my sister leave with us." "No." Before Gale Xiao could say anything, the black-clothed referee sneered and said, "This female martial slave has already stepped onto the Azura battle platform. She cannot leave." Nie Tian's face darkened as he looked at the black-clothed referee cold. "This is the rule of the Dark Knight Azura Arena. Anyone who steps onto the Azura battle platform cannot give up." The black-clothed referee smiled coldly and said. Nie Tian frowned. He thought for a moment and said to Nie Yuro, "Wait to the side. I promise you that I will bring you out of this Azura Arena." Nie Yuro nodded and retreated to the side. Gale Xiao had a helpless expression and could only leave. Everyone, the most exciting moment is about to begin. The challenge to the Azura King is about to begin. At this time, the black-clothed referee's figure flashed, and he leaped into the air. He shouted, "Those who want the Gale Mystic Jade, hurry up and make your move." Chapter 21:37. Big Brother Nie Tian, be careful. The slaves suddenly attacked. Nie Yuro's eyes trembled as she cried out, "You're looking to die." Nie Tian's lips curled up coldly as he looked at the person who had attacked. His eyes were filled with killing intent. This was the person who had almost killed Nie Yuro earlier. This slave was not weak. He had already reached late over God. Clearly, he wanted to take advantage of Nie Tian's unpreparedness to strike first and kill Nie Tian in a single stroke. Unfortunately, he had thought too much. Nie Tian's strength had far exceeded his expectations. Swish! Nie Tian did not move at all. His body only trembled slightly as a sword move erupted. It turned into boundless sword intent and condensed into a blur that shot out. Boom! The blur was like a mountain. It was vast and powerful as it fell. Before the slave could even react, he had been swallowed by the boundless sword intent. The sudden scene caused everyone's eyes to tremble and their expressions to stiffen. The entire place fell into a deathly silence. Who would have thought that Nie Tian would stand where he was and kill an opponent of the same level without moving at all? This scene was just too strange and shocking. Originally, everyone had thought that Nie Tian would fight with the slave for a long time. They had never thought that the battle would end so quickly. Nie Yuro was stunned as well. She looked at Nie Tian in disbelief and said in a daze, "Big Brother Nie Tian, you're so powerful." She was currently a mid-over-god, only a minor realm weaker than Nie Tian. However, compared to Nie Tian, her battle prowess was like the gap between heaven and earth. Nie Tian's battle prowess was so terrifying that it had far exceeded Nie Yuro's expectations. A while later, the crowd finally returned to their senses and erupted into an uproar. Heavens, am I seeing things? That silver-haired brat actually killed an opponent of the same level with just his sword move. That kid's sword intent is so terrifying. His opponent doesn't even have the strength to fight back. This guy's strength is too strange. The battle of the King of Challengers is going to be interesting. Everyone was surprised and shocked, but more than that, they were happy. The stronger Nie Tian was, the more exciting the battle would be. "Good lad, you have some strength." The black-clothed referee was also stunned for a moment before he reacted. Then, he laughed coldly and said in a loud voice, "Everyone, it looks like the kid who challenged the Azura King is much stronger than we expected. However, it is precisely because of this that this battle is more interesting. If any of you want to obtain the Storm Mystic Jade, hurry up and let the martial slaves do it." Nie Tian was very strong, but the temptation of the Gale Mystic Jade was obviously stronger. As soon as the black-clothed referee finished speaking, several figures appeared in the sky above the Azura battle platform. Anyone could attempt to challenge the Azura king, but once they stepped onto the Azura battle platform, the only outcome was death. Looking up into the sky, the corner of Nietion's mouth twitched as he said coldly, "Good. Come and me together." These martial slaves were obviously here for the Storm Mystic Jade. When they looked at Nietion, their eyes were vicious and sinister, as if he was their irreconcilable enemy. "Kill!" The four martial slaves roared at the same time and moved in unison, attacking Nietion. They were all people who had experienced countless life and death situations on the Azura battle platform. Their methods were cruel and ruthless, and they were bloodthirsty. Their first move was a sure kill move. Unfortunately, the enemy they were facing was too terrifying. In Nietion's eyes, their sure kill moves were too weak. Boom! Nietion didn't even look at them. His entire body surged with sword aura, and his entire body was like a giant sword in the air. The terrifying sword intent around him turned into surging waves that swept towards the sky. In the next moment, miserable screams came from the sky. The four martial slaves hadn't even gotten close to Nietion when they were sent flying by the waves of sword intent. The crowd was stunned once again when they saw this scene. Their eyes trembled violently, and they almost stopped breathing. Nietion's terror was far beyond their expectations. Up until now, Nietion had only released sword aura, and he had not revealed his true strength. In fact, he hadn't even drawn his sword. A swordsman's strength would be greatly reduced before he drew his sword. However, even though Nietion's strength was greatly reduced, he still shocked everyone. "A bunch of trash," the black-clothed referee roared. Nietion's strength was unimaginable. Yuro watched from the side, her mouth wide open. She was completely dumbfounded. Outside the Azura arena, Gale Little was also stunned. He had asked Nietion what his strongest battle prowess was, and the latter's answer was early or mid-Paramount God. At the time, Gale Little had been a little skeptical, but now he didn't doubt it at all. The strength Nietion was displaying now completely exceeded that of an ordinary late overgod. It was too shocking. Nietion's strength is far beyond that, Mizuhara Kori said with a faint smile. Her expression didn't change in the slightest. He had fought with Nietion before, and the latter had even been able to face him head-on. That was a testament to his strength. Moreover, he knew that the most terrifying thing about Nietion wasn't his supreme battle prowess, but his freakish martial constitution and regenerative abilities. If he challenged the Azura king, no matter how many opponents there were, they wouldn't be able to pose a threat to Nietion. "Is there anyone else? Bring it on." With a faint smile, Nietion called out in a loud voice, looking extremely arrogant. "Damn it!" The black-clothed referee's face darkened. He called out, "Sirs, can you bear to watch a late overgod act so arrogantly?" Nietion's strength was indeed terrifying, but the black-clothed referee knew that the powerful martial slaves of the major figures hadn't appeared yet. Next, a dozen or so figures appeared from all directions, directly entering the air above the Azura arena. This level of strength is still too weak. Nietionling looked coldly at the dozen or so figures. All of them were peak overgods. This was already the peak of strength among martial slaves, but in Nietion's eyes, they were still nothing. How arrogant! Immediately afterwards, more than a dozen peak overgod slaves let out explosive roars and launched attacks at the same time. More than a dozen powerful attacks combined into one, which morphed into a terrifying palm shadow that smashed down towards Nietion. The combined attack of a dozen peak overgods was enough to threaten an early Paramount God. Roar! However, Nietion didn't even look at it. He directly punched out, and a terrifying dragon's roar rang through the entire Azura arena. Boom! In the next moment, the shadow of the palm and the shadow of the dragon collided. With a loud bang, the shadow of the palm instantly collapsed, and the frightening shadow of the dragon soared into the sky. Violent power rushed into the void, majestic and vast. Miserable howls resounded, and more than a dozen figures were sent flying in all directions, leaving behind trails of blood in the air. Chapter 21:38. More than a dozen peak over-god martial artists attacked at the same time, but Nyetian easily blocked their attack. Moreover, these people were heavily injured by Nyetian, and some even died on the spot. This scene was too terrifying. Unbelievable. This was the power of a late over-god martial artist. Everyone at the scene had a blank look on their faces. Even their breathing became uneven. Dragon Chi. At this time, the black-clothed referee reacted, and his eyes suddenly trembled. The next moment, he seemed to have discovered something, and his expression suddenly changed. He exclaimed in his heart, "There is a dragon vein in his body. Is he from the Guardian clan?" The Guardian clan? The referee actually mentioned this name. Obviously, he knew about the existence of the Guardian clan. Damn it! The black-clothed referee's face darkened, and the killing intent in his eyes became more intense. He roared in his heart, "Brat, I don't care who you are, since you dare to challenge the Azura King, then prepare to die." After a while, the crowd came to their senses. This time, they did not scream, but looked at Nyetian in disbelief, as if they were looking at a monster. At this moment, in their eyes, Nyetian was a monster, or even more terrifying than a monster. The crowd could not predict the limit of Nyetian's combat strength, because they could not understand Nyetian at all. At this time, Gale Xiao was also shocked, and his eyes flickered with a fiery light. Nyetian's combat strength was beyond his expectations, and it gave him a big surprise. Moreover, he could also see that Nyetian had not revealed his true strength. "Insienue, are you still not going to show yourself?" Gale Xiao forced himself to calm down, and his eyes swept across the VIP rooms. He knew that Insienue was here. Insienue must have seen him reveal his identity just now, but he did not show himself. Perhaps in Insieneue's eyes, Gale Xiao was already a clown, no longer worthy of his attention. Until now, Gale Xiao could not understand why Insienue had framed him back then. This time, he wanted to catch Insienue not only to prove his innocence, but also to ask the latter why he did it. Gale Xiao believed that as long as Nyetian showed enough talent, Inataki would definitely show up. What he was most worried about at this time was not whether Inataki would show up, but whether Inataki was very strong. It would be terrible if Mizuhara Kaori was not Ingenue's opponent. "Is this all you've got? What a mess." Meanwhile, Nyetian's arrogant voice resounded on the Azura arena. Everyone looked at Nyetian with sparkling eyes. There was no longer any contempt in their eyes. Nyetian had said many times before that he was arrogant because he had the capital to be arrogant. His strength was his capital. As Nyetian's voice fell, there was no response from the Azura battle platform for a long time. The scene just now was too shocking. Based on the strength that Nyetian had displayed, unless he was an over-god martial artist, there was no way anyone could be a match for him. "What? No one else dares to challenge me?" Niet Tianling sneered arrogantly. The black-clothed referee stared at him coldly, his teeth itching with hatred. "Since no slave dares to go up, then let this young master have a taste of you." At this moment, a cold voice sounded, and a man in white appeared in front of everyone. Finally, someone can't hold it in anymore. The black-clothed referee looked at the man in white and smiled coldly. What he had been waiting for were these impatient young masters and young masters. Early stage over-god strength. Nyetian's eyes narrowed as he looked at the man in white. He could not help but exclaim in surprise. Didn't the Azura battle platform only allow over-god experts to go up? Why was there an over-god martial artist here? Nyetian was stunned for a moment, but then he understood. This man in white was not a slave, but a young master of a great family. Gale Xiao had said that the Azura battle platform only allowed slaves with the strength of an overgod, but the young masters and young masters had no such restriction. As long as they wanted to, they could go up and kill slaves at any time. It was obvious that this man in white was a young master. At this moment, Nyetian finally understood what Gale Xiao had meant when he said that challenging the Azura King would not be so easy. So other than slaves, there were also young masters and young masters who could challenge him. "Kid, Your strength is amazing, and your martial Dao talent is not bad. The man in white slowly descended, a faint smile on his face. But the Gale Mystic Jade is a good item, and I must obtain it. So, I'll have to trouble you to die. His voice was calm, but it could not conceal the cold, killing intent in it. Are you that confident that you can kill me? Nyetian smiled, a hint of mockery in his eyes. The man in white was not weak, but in Nyetian's eyes, he was not worth a second glance. Nyetian did not even need to use the 3 forbidden techniques to kill him. Kid, your battle prowess is indeed terrifying to be able to kill over a dozen peak-over gods. But unfortunately, I'm a paramount god. The man in white smiled coldly. The white-robed man sneered and said, You'll soon see just how great the difference is between an over-god and a paramount god. Make your move. Nyetian laughed. He did not want to waste any more time talking to the idiot before him, so he spoke directly. Oomph. The man in white sneered and said, Countless slaves have died to my hands, but you are the most interesting one. I can make an exception for you and let you make the first move. I'll let you live a little longer. The white-robed man's voice wasn't loud, but every word he uttered was filled with an insufferably arrogant air. Since you're looking to die, don't blame me. Nyetian shook his head. His expression was cold and murderous. The man in white's tone and condescending attitude were unbearable. Nyetian felt that if he listened to this man's nonsense any longer, he would definitely vomit. People who thought they were omnipotent just because they were a little stronger were the most foolish. Kid, you should be grateful for my kindness because... The man in white still had a smile on his face as he looked at Nyetian playfully. However, he only managed to finish half of his sentence. He would never get the chance to finish the other half. The moment he opened his mouth, a sword shadow shot through the air. It was extremely sharp, so fast that it was faster than the blink of an eye. It suddenly flashed past an unbelievable angle. The man in white had only spoken half of his sentence when he suddenly felt a chill on his neck. Immediately after, warm blood violently spurted out. He wanted to cover his wound, but just as he raised his hands, his entire head had already flown into the air. The white-robed man, in a situation where he could not react at all, was directly decapitated and died. Chapter 2139. Your strength doesn't match your arrogance at all. A cold voice rang out. There was a tinge of mockery and arrogance in it, but there was more coldness in it. The white-robed man's head was cut off by Nyetian's sword before he could even react. The sword strike was extremely fast and sharp. It was beyond the white-clothed man's expectations, as well as everyone else's. This was the first time Nyetian had used a sword. Who would have thought that his sword intent would be so terrifying? The white-clothed man had been extremely arrogant earlier, completely disregarding Nyetian. Now, his ending was simply ridiculous. To kill the white-clothed man, Nyetian had used the Starlight Heaven Slash, but that was all. He's dead. After a dozen seconds of silence, someone finally came to his senses and sucked in a breath of cold air. He looked at Nyetian with trembling eyes, his expression one of extreme shock. No one had thought that Nyetian's strength had reached such a terrifying level. But this wasn't what shocked them the most. What they couldn't accept the most was that Nyetian had actually dared to kill the white-clothed man. That white-clothed man was obviously a young master of a large force. His identity was extraordinary, but Nyetian's attack was decisive and ruthless. He had killed with one strike, leaving no chance of survival. These young masters often went to the Azura battle platform to play, but they had always tortured and killed martial slaves. But today, this white-clothed man had been killed by Nyetian. This was beyond everyone's expectations. Brat, you killed him? The black-clothed referee reacted at this time. He was stunned and exclaimed. Nyetian slowly raised his head. His eyes were dark and gloomy. He said indifferently, He's just an idiot. I killed him. Is there a problem? Brat, the black-clothed referee's face darkened. He felt as if a huge rock was pressing on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. Eighth brother. In the next moment, a howl resounded, and then a white-clothed man appeared. His completely red eyes were like those of a wolf as he stared fixedly at Nyetian. and he wished for nothing more than to tear Nyation into pieces. The man in white who had just died in the hands of Nyation was his eighth brother, Monarch. At this moment, the black-clothed referee saw the white-clothed man and was stunned. He asked in astonishment, the person who just died, was he from the Monarch family? The man in white before him was called Monarch, and he was a member of the 5 great clans of the Inuit Empire. The Inuit Empire was extremely powerful. Other than the Inuit imperial family, there were also 5 great clans. The Monarch clan was one of the 5 great clans of the Inuit Empire. The Swiftwind clan was also one of the 5 great clans, and it was once the leader of the 5 great clans. At its peak, the Swiftwind clan could even rival the Inuit imperial clan. However, after the small incident with the Swiftwind clan was suppressed by the imperial family. Now, their reputation was far from what it used to be, and they had already fallen to the bottom of the 5 great clans. The black-clothed referee did not expect that the person who had just died in the hands of Nyation was actually a member of the Monarch clan. A disciple of a great clan had died in the Dark Azura arena. Even if it was an accident, the Dark Azura arena had to bear a certain amount of responsibility. The black-clothed referee could only pray that the person who had just died did not have a high position in the Monarch clan. Another one to die? Nyation raised his head and looked at Monarch. He smiled coldly, and his eyes were as cold as ice. Damn brat, how dare you kill a member of the Monarch clan? You're courting death. Monarch roared angrily. He took a step forward, and the aura around his body exploded. Young Master Monarch, this brat's strength is a little strange. Stand down first. I'll arrange for the cultivators of the Azura arena to deal with him. The black-clothed referee was stunned, but he quickly reacted and said hurriedly, the Monarch clan had already lost a member. If Monarch were to die as well, it would be very troublesome. The black-clothed referee knew that Monarch was a direct descendant of the Monarch clan. His status was extraordinary. He killed my 8th brother. I'll kill him with my own hands. However, Monarch didn't seem to care at all. She let out a furious roar and descended from the sky to confront Nyation. The black-clothed referee's eyes trembled. If he interfered now, it would be the same as breaking the rules of the Dark Azura arena. Monarch is a mid-stage paramount god. Given his strength, he should be able to kill this silver-haired brat. The black-clothed referee thought for a moment, but in the end, he steadied himself. He felt that Monarch's strength should be enough to kill Nyation. At that moment, the crowd reacted. Their expressions changed, and they cried out in alarm. Oh my God, a direct descendant of the Monarch clan has appeared. This silver-hair brat is in big trouble. He just killed someone from the Monarch clan. The one who offered him as collateral was the young master of the Galewind clan. It seems that this brat has a close relationship with the Galewind clan. Do you think the Monarch clan and the Galewind clan will come to blows because of this? The crowd chattered excitedly, their eyes blazing with excitement. Today's battle against the Azura King was even more exciting than they had imagined. Holy shit, Monarch is making a move. On the other side, Gale Little's eyes widened when he saw Monarch making a move. He was very worried about Nyation's safety. He knew that Monarch was one of the 3 geniuses of the Monarch clan, and he was very strong. Furthermore, Nyation had said that his peak battle prowess was that of a mid-stage paramount god, and Monarch was a mid-stage paramount god. However, Monarch was no ordinary mid-stage paramount god. His battle prowess was definitely comparable to a late-stage paramount god. Don't worry, Nyation is much stronger than you think. But Mizahara Kaori, who was standing beside Gale Little, had a calm expression on her face. She didn't look nervous at all. Gale Little was taken aback. He glanced at Mizahara Kaori and thought to himself, could it be that Nyation's strength is even more terrifying than a mid-stage paramount god? Meanwhile, on the Azura battle platform, Stinking Brat, do you know who you just killed? His surname is Monarch, and he's from the Monarch clan. Monarch's eyes were cold as he shouted angrily. So what if he's from the Monarch clan? The corner of Nyation's mouth curled up, and he said in a cold tone, "Just because his surname is Murong, I have to stand still and let him kill me willingly." "That's right." Murong Chi roared angrily. "You lowly martial slave. You're nothing but a beast to be tortured to death. What right do you have to kill someone from the Murong clan?" Nietion's eyes narrowed when he heard Murong Chi's words, and his expression turned grim and murderous. He said in a cold tone, "So in your eyes, martial slaves aren't humans at all. They're just beasts to be tortured to death. But let me tell you today, martial slaves aren't beasts. They're humans too. Today, not only will I kill your brother, but I'll also kill you." As soon as Nietion's voice faded, terrifying black magical symbols rose up around him, and his aura skyrocketed. Since Murong Chi didn't see martial slaves as humans, then he, Nietion, didn't need to see Murong Chi as one either. Chapter 2140. On the Azura Arena, Nietion's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Black talismans surged around him, and his aura skyrocketed. He had activated the forbidden art talisman in his body. Murong Chi's insolence was intolerable to Nietion. In Murong Chi's eyes, only the Murong family could torture and kill martial slaves, but not allow them to fight back. There was no such logic in this world. Nietion wanted to make him understand that if he treated others like animals, others would treat him like animals too. "Huh? What's going on?" The black-clothed referee couldn't help but cry out when he saw the strange black talismans revolving around Nietion. To his surprise, he sensed that Nietion's strength and aura were skyrocketing. Early paramount god. In the blink of an eye, the black-robed referee could sense that Nietion had reached the early paramount god level, causing his jaw to clatter in shock. Nietion was originally a late over-god, but he had become an early paramount god in the blink of an eye. It was too strange. It shouted his strength suddenly increase. The others also sensed it, and they cried out in shock. They couldn't believe their eyes. Nietion hovered in the air, his eyes as calm as still water. There wasn't the slightest bit of emotion in them, only the coldest killing intent. At this moment, he had only activated the dragon inscription talisman, one of the 3 forbidden arts. He hadn't activated the other 2. He believed that one dragon inscription talisman would be enough to deal with Murong Chi. "Die, you lowly slave." At this moment, Murong Chi was completely enraged. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she was like a wild beast as her figure flashed and charged toward them. He didn't even notice that Nietion's aura had changed. "You're courting death." Facing Murong Chi's all-out attack, Nietion's lips twitched. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He raised the starry heavenly slash in his hand, and a terrifying sword slash was unleashed. Starry Sky, ancient martial technique, Darkstar, ghostly slash. Boom! The sword intent was sharp and fierce, and a black, ghostly sword projection shot through the air. In the blink of an eye, space seemed to freeze. Murong Chi suddenly stopped in midair. Her entire body suddenly stiffened like a piece of wood. She stood motionless on the spot. What's going on? The sudden turn of events caused the eyes of the crowd to tremble violently. They stared at Murong Chi without blinking, afraid that they would miss out on the most exciting scene. "You lowly slave, you." Bang! Murong Chi's eyes flickered as he suddenly raised his hand, intending to point at Nietion. However, before he could finish his last movement, his body shook violently and exploded into a cloud of blood-colored light. He died on the spot. Before blood and blood, he had died. Everyone held their breath at this moment. The shock in their hearts was written on their stiff faces. Murong Chi was a genius from the Murong clan, a mid-paramount god, and yet she had been killed by Nietion, and in such a straightforward manner. Murong Chi, a genius of the Murong clan, a mid-paramount god, had been killed by Nietion, and in such a straightforward manner. "How dare you be so arrogant when you're so weak?" Niet Tianling said with a cold smile, his eyes devoid of any pity. At this moment, the crowd finally reacted and gasped. In fact, they even suspected that the scene earlier was an illusion. None of them could have imagined that the fight between Murong-Chi and Nietian would end up like this. Meanwhile, Gale Xiaoxiao's expression was completely blank, and he didn't react for a long time. He had been worried about Nietian, but never could he have imagined that things would turn out like this. Nietian was a complete freak. Nietian, Mizuhara said to herself, her eyes trembling. No wonder you can activate the ninely steel, Nietian. Even she had to admit that Nietian was more talented in the martial Dao than she was. Brat, you killed Murong-Chi. In the next moment, the black-clothed referee finally came to his senses. He let out a strange roar. He was on the verge of going crazy. Never in his wildest dreams did he think that Murong-Chi would die so easily. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, and he didn't even have a chance to react. However, he still saw clearly that Murong-Chi was killed by Nietian's sword intent. Nietian's sword intent invaded Murong-Chi's body. The latter's martial body couldn't withstand the violence of the sword intent, so her body exploded and she died. So what if I killed him? Nie Tianling laughed, his eyes calm and provocative. From the black-clothed referee's reaction, he knew that Murong-Chi's status was very high. However, he didn't care at all, because he still had to capture the crown princess of the Inuit Empire, In Xie. He didn't even care about the Inuit Empire, so why would he care about Murong-Chi's life? Brat, you're a lunatic! The black-clothed referee roared angrily. He was obviously extremely furious, and his entire body was trembling. So what if I'm a lunatic? At least I'm better than these idiots who came to their deaths. Nie Tianling laughed, the corners of his mouth curling into a disdainful smile. The black-clothed referee's eyes trembled, and he couldn't speak for a long time. After that, the Azura arena fell into a deathly silence. Countless eyes stared at Nie Tian, but no one dared to step into the Azura arena again. Nie Tian was too powerful, and his attacks were very ruthless. He didn't care about his opponent's status at all. The direct descendant of the Murong family had already died in the hands of Nie Tian, so how could anyone else dare to make a move? Is this all you descendants of the great families have? Nie Tian couldn't help but laugh coldly when no one appeared for a long time, and he provoked them arrogantly. His insolent voice resounded in the air above the Azura arena, but no one responded. Don't you want the storm mystic jade? How come no one's coming out now? Nie Tian said in a loud voice, his eyes filled with disdain. Unfortunately for him, the arena was completely silent, and no one stepped forward. The storm mystic jade was tempting, but their lives were more important. Up until now, Nie Tian had killed people with a single move, even mid-paramount gods. Who knew how terrifying his true strength was? Therefore, not even the late paramount gods dared to make any attempts to do so. The black-clothed referee looked coldly at Nie Tian. You won't be able to keep your arrogance up for much longer, you filthy brat. He had already sent people to make the necessary arrangements. Soon, a large group of experts would show up to kill Nie Tian. The title of King of Azuras in the Dark Azura arena wasn't something that could be casually taken away. Furthermore, Nie Tian had killed Murong-Chi. If the Dark Azura arena allowed him to leave alive, how would he explain it to the Murong family? At this time, Nie Tian suddenly glanced at Nie Yuro and immediately thought of something. His face darkened, and he said loudly, Eldest Princess of the Dark Moon Empire, Your Highness In Xie, I know you're here. Why don't you make a move and show me how strong the legendary In Moon Evil Seal is? Nie Tian's voice wasn't loud, but every word he spoke was like a clap of thunder that exploded in everyone's hearts. Chapter 2141. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Nie Tian, horrified and surprised. Who would have thought that Nie Tian would be so arrogant as to directly provoke In Xianwei? Who was In Xianwei? The eldest princess of the Inuit Empire. To provoke In Xianwei was to provoke the entire Inuit Empire. The Inuit Empire was a super empire force in the Forsaken Land. Looking at the entire Forsaken Land, there were only a handful of forces stronger than the Inuit Empire. Who was Nie Tian? Where did he get the courage to provoke the Inuit Empire so blatantly? Nietion's words stunned the black-clothed referee. His eyes kept trembling, and he said in horror, "Is this silver-haired boy really from the Guardian clan?" The Guardian clan was a mysterious force in the Forsaken Land that very few people knew about. But the black-clothed referee was very clear that the Guardian clan was not weaker than the Inuit Empire. According to legend, the most obvious characteristic of the Guardian clan was the dragon vein in their body. Previously, Nietion had released Dragon Shi, and at that moment, the black-clothed referee noticed that there was a dragon vein in his body. It was also at that time that the black-clothed referee began to suspect that Nietion might be from the Guardian clan. Now, Nietion was so arrogant to provoke the eldest princess of the Inuit Empire, which made the black-clothed referee even more suspicious of his identity. If there was no powerful force behind him, how could Nietion have enough confidence to dare to openly challenge the Inuit Empire? And Nietion's talent and strength also shocked the black-clothed referee. He had seen countless geniuses in his life, but no one could stand shoulder to shoulder with Nietion. He believed that a genius like Nietion must have a powerful force behind him to support him. Otherwise, it would be impossible to have such strength. This boy is most likely from the Guardian clan. Thinking of this, the black-clothed referee was even more convinced that Nietion was from the mysterious Guardian clan. "Sir," at this moment, a voice sounded in the black-clothed referee's mind. He suddenly raised his head and looked into the void, noticing that there were dozens of black-robed figures. These people were all Azura martial slaves raised by the Dark Knight Azura Field. They had specially appeared at this time to deal with some troublesome people for the Azura Field. The Azuras were all late paramount gods, and if they joined forces, they would definitely be able to kill Nietion. Originally, the black-clothed judge had wanted the Shura martial slave to deal with Nietion, but now he hesitated. This kid's identity is mysterious and unfathomable. If he dies at the hands of the Azura martial slave, I'm afraid it will bring unnecessary trouble to the Azura arena. The black-clothed referee pondered and analyzed. His goal is unclear, but he doesn't seem to have come for the Azura arena. Instead, he came specifically for Een Jianwe. The female martial slave he is protecting is Een Sie's martial slave. He seems to have an extraordinary relationship with this female martial slave, and now he is directly looking for Een Jianwe. It seems that he wants revenge. Since that's the case, there's no need for the Azura arena to interfere. It's better to let this kid fight with Een Sie, the Inuit Empire versus the Guardian clan. This will definitely be a great show. Een Sie was a frequent visitor of the Dark Knight Azura Field, so the black-clothed referee could naturally tell at a glance that Nyeyuro, who wore a green ribbon around her neck, was Een Sie's martial slave. He had already regarded Nietion as a member of the Guardian clan, so he didn't dare to do anything to Nietion. Although Nietion had killed Murong Chi, the Murong clan and the Guardian clan were clearly not on the same level. The Dark Knight Azura Field would rather offend the Murong clan than the Guardian clan. "All of you stand down." The black-clothed referee immediately made a decision. He would not let the Shura martial slave make a move. He wanted to watch the fight from the sidelines. The Shura martial slave immediately left. The black-clothed referee's lips curled up slightly. He raised his head to look at a VIP room in the spectator area and thought to himself, "Princess Een Sie, with your personality, you definitely won't remain indifferent after being provoked like this." It had to be said that Nietion's current arrogance had done himself a great favor. Otherwise, he would have to face dozens of late-stage, supreme, god, Shura martial slaves. However, there was no movement on the Azura battle platform for a long time after Nietion's words fell. The entire place was deathly silent. "Een Sie, I'm Gale Little's friend. He has already appeared, and you don't even have the courage to show yourself?" Nietionling smiled coldly and said in a loud voice, "I know everything you've done to Gale Little. Let me tell you, today, I'm here to seek justice for Gale Little." His loud voice sounded like the cry of a crane from the 9 heavens, resounding through the void. Since Gale Little had already admitted his identity, Nietion didn't have to worry too much about it now. Right now, he wanted to force Sia to show himself. At this moment, the crowd began to whisper to each other when they heard Nietion's words. This kid, what is he saying? Why don't I understand? This guy seems to be talking about Gale Little. From his tone, it sounds like Gale Little was wrong back then. Gale Little's matter is strange enough. Who knows what happened back then? Who the hell is this kid? How dare he say that he's seeking justice for Gale Little? Does he have the strength to do so? The crowd discussed, their eyes blazing. It seemed that the show in front of them was getting more and more exciting. Sia, you're the eldest princess of the Inuit dynasty, the #1 genius of the Inuit dynasty in a million years. But turns out that you were just a coward. Nietion became even more arrogant when he saw that Sia still hadn't come out. Sia not only harmed Gale Little, but also turned Nyeyuro into a martial slave. Nietion wanted to see with his own eyes what this vicious woman was like. Brat, you're too arrogant. At this time, someone finally couldn't bear it anymore. A black-robed figure appeared in the sky, looking at Nietion with a stern expression. You're not worthy of Her Royal Highness to show up. Immediately afterwards, another figure appeared. Staring at Nietion with an icy look in his eyes, he said coldly, "Let us play with you." Nietion suddenly looked up at the two people in the sky, smiled faintly, and said, "After cursing for so long, the master didn't come out, but 2 dogs came out." These 2 black-robed martial artists were late-stage supreme gods, and they also had green ribbons tied around their necks. Obviously, they were Sia's subordinates. Brat, who are you calling dogs? The 2 black-robed martial artists roared, and their figures moved at the same time, the aura around them pressing down. Nietion wasn't afraid at all. His body shook slightly, breaking through the pressure in the sky, and said coldly, "I cursed Sia, but you came out. Tell me, if you're not Sia's dogs, then what are you?" Chapter 2142. Rumble. The 2 black-robed cultivators attacked at the same time, their energy surging out in all directions. "Big brother Nietion, be careful." Nyeyuro cried out in alarm as she saw this scene from the side. The crowd's expressions darkened, and they were both nervous and expectant. It's about time I show you what I'm really capable of. When Nietion felt the pressure bearing down on him, his mouth twitched, and black magical symbols appeared around him. His energy surged, and he was now a late paramount god. This time, he was using his 3 forbidden magics to unleash his true power. God-crushing sword. Nietion slashed out with his sword, sending out a mountainous sword image. Rumble, rumble. In the void, a loud rumbling sound rang out. The fish shadow and the sword shadow collapsed at the same time. A terrifying force spread out in all directions, wreaking havoc in the space. The 2 black-robed cultivators were forced to retreat, looking very bedraggled. At the same time, Nietion suddenly thought of something, and he spun around to look at Nyeyuro. Nyeyuro was only a mid-over god, and her martial body was very weak. There was no way she could withstand the shockwaves. Nietion's body trembled as he activated the purple heaven lightning battle armor. In an instant, he transformed into a streak of purple light that whizzed out and enveloped Nyeyuro. In the next moment, Nietion was still not at ease. Vast amounts of astral energy surged out from his body, transforming into an astral soul shield that enveloped Nyeyuro. With the protection of both the violet heavenly lightning armor and the astral shield, Nyeyuro was very safe. This guy is so strong. The crowd looked on in astonishment at the scene playing out on the Azura arena platform. Who could have guessed that Nietion would have the strength to protect Nyeyuro while facing off against 2 late paramount gods? Who exactly are you, silver hair brat? What kind of power do you have inside of you? The black-robed judge looked at Nietion, his eyes filled with astonishment and confusion. He could only watch helplessly as Nietion rose from a late lord god to a late paramount god. It was simply too terrifying. He simply couldn't figure out what kind of power Nietion had in his body that could actually cause his strength to instantly rise by a major realm. In the heart of the black-clothed referee, Nyetian became even more mysterious and unfathomable. The black-clothed referee was even glad that he did not let the Shuro warrior slave deal with Nyetian. He was now absolutely sure that Nyetian must have come from a super-powerful force. How is this possible? On the other side, Gale let out a strange cry. His small eyes were wide open. He almost couldn't believe that Nyetian was actually a late paramount god. There was no doubt that Nyetian had lied about his highest combat strength. Beside Gale Xiao, Mizuhara Kaori was also shocked. She thought to herself, the Jillystone tablet did not choose the wrong person. Lord Saint Duelist must be the one who can change the fate of the 9 clans. At this moment, Mizuhara Kaori was very sure that Nyetian could change the fate of the 9 clans. At this moment, he finally realized the gap between him and Nyetian, and he completely accepted Nyetian's identity as a Saint Duelist. Brat, how can your strength be? At the same time, on the Azura battle platform, the 2 black-clothed martial artists looked at Nyetian in shock, completely unable to believe their eyes. How did my strength suddenly increase? Nyetian smiled faintly, but then his face darkened, and he said in a cold voice, "Is there any point in knowing the answer to 2 people who are about to die?" At this moment, Nyetian's eyes were very cold. He looked at the 2 black-clothed cultivators as if they were 2 dead men. Indeed, in his heart, the 2 of them were already dead. How arrogant! The 2 black-clothed cultivators roared and attacked at the same time. Their auras merged into one, turning into the image of a terrifying wild beast that pounced over. Bloodline power? Seeing this, Nyetian laughed and said with a plain tone, "It seems that you 2 are brothers. I didn't expect that you could merge your bloodline power." Clearly, the 2 black-clothed cultivators had activated their bloodline power. Since they were brothers, their bloodline power could be merged to release even greater strength. One of the black-clothed cultivators laughed coldly, as if he could already see the scene of Nyetian being devoured by the wild beast. "Brat, when we merge our bloodline power, we can fight a peak paramount god. Let's see how you block this move." "Is that so?" Nyetian didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Instead, he gave a cold chuckle as boundless dragon energy surged out of him. At the same time, a sea of crimson lightning appeared behind him, and an enormous crimson dragon appeared. Roar! In the next moment, a terrifying dragon roar could be heard, shaking heaven and earth. The enormous crimson dragon was thousands of meters long, and it was surrounded by the terrifying power of lightning. At the same time, it was wreathed in bizarre black flames. Whiz! In the blink of an eye, the space around it seemed to be under the pressure of the dragon energy, and a groaning sound could be heard. What? The onlookers opened their mouths wide, but couldn't say a word. Dragon Meridian. What a terrifying Dragon Meridian. The black-clothed judge almost cried out in shock. Moments ago, he had been suspicious of Nyetian's identity. But now, he was certain that Nyetian was from one of the protectors. Not good. At the same time, the enormous crimson dragon surged out. The 2 black-clothed cultivators sensed that something was wrong. They cried out and immediately retreated. Unfortunately, it was too late. Rumble! The enormous crimson dragon descended, and the wild beast in the sky was crushed. Bang! Bang! 2 muffled sounds rang out, and the 2 black-clothed figures were sent flying. They exploded in mid-air, turning into a pool of blood. The dragon energy lingered in the air for a while before dissipating. Nyetian's figure hovered in midair like a sharp sword, his eyes disdainfully looking down on everything. Countless eyes focused on Nyetian. They were stunned, and their eyes were filled with disbelief. Once again, Nyetian had overturned everyone's understanding of the way of martial arts. No one present could imagine that a late over-god could actually erupt with such terrifying power. 2 late over-gods with the power of bloodlines had been killed, just like that. It was difficult to accept. Nyetian stood there with a faint smile on his lips. In fact, he didn't expect the power of the Supreme Dragon Meridian to be so strong. He just wanted to test the power of the Supreme Dragon Meridian on a whim, but he didn't expect the result to shock even himself. At this moment, Tian ignored the crowd's shock. He suddenly raised his head, looked at the sky, and said loudly, "Ingenue, your two dogs are dead. Why don't you show yourself?" Once again, Niet Tian provoked Ingenue, forcing him to show himself. The crowd was stunned, and then they looked up at the viewing area with blazing eyes, as if they were looking forward to Ingenue's appearance. Chapter 2143. High up in the sky, a cold and deep voice fell, and everyone's eyes trembled. Ingenue was going to show up. Ingenue. On the viewing platform below, Gale Xiao's pupils shrank when he heard this voice, and his chest heaved up and down violently. He was too familiar with this voice, and he would never forget it. This was Ingenue's voice. The person who made him lose everything was finally going to show up. Ingenue, is he really going to show up? The black-clothed referee's eyes trembled, and he looked at a VIP room, the corners of his mouth involuntarily revealing a cold smile. The eldest princess of the Inue Empire was about to meet the mysterious kid from the Guardian family. This was a rare scene. Ingenue, come out. Tian raised the corner of his mouth slightly and said loudly. He was very curious about what this vicious woman looked like. At this moment, everyone's eyes were wide open, waiting for the scene of Ingenue's appearance. Everyone present had only heard of Ingenue's name, but had never seen the latter's true appearance. The eldest princess of the Inue Empire was about to show up. How could they not be excited? I'm very curious. Why do you want to see me so much? The next moment, the door of a VIP room slowly opened, and a cold voice came out. A figure in green walked out step by step. Niet Tian's eyes trembled, staring at the figure in green high up in the sky. It was a very young face, with delicate and beautiful facial features and a curvaceous figure. A layer of faintly discernible black aura circulated around his body. He seemed to have walked out of the darkness, giving off a mysterious and evil feeling. She was the eldest princess of the Inue Empire, Ingenue. Niet Tian looked at Ingenue from afar. The latter's eyes were very strange, like an abyss, hiding an elusive cold aura. Ingenue, you finally showed up. Niet Tian became cold, the corners of his mouth slightly smiling, but his eyes were extremely cold. Your Excellency has deliberately tried to force me to show up. May I know why? Ingenue said lightly, but there was a lingering evil in his tone. I've already said that I'm Gale's little friend. Today, I'm here to seek justice for him. Niet Tianlong coldly replied, before turning to Yuro and saying, Also, this girl is my little sister. You captured her to be your martial slave. As her brother, shouldn't I do something? Ingenue's reaction after appearing was too calm, which caught Niet Tian by surprise. He originally thought that the other party would be very impulsive and couldn't wait to kill him. Unexpectedly, Ingenue was able to remain so calm. This undoubtedly showed that this woman was not only ruthless, but also extremely shrewd. Is that all? Ingenue's eyes flickered as he asked in a strange tone. Isn't this enough? Niet Tian's eyes were gloomy as he asked. Ingenue shook his head slightly with a strange smile on his face. In her opinion, Niet Tian's reasons were indeed very weak and not even worth mentioning. For a friend, for a sister, he openly made an enemy of the Inue Empire. Such a move was really stupid. In Ingenue's eyes, there were no friends, no family, so she couldn't understand Niet Tian's actions. At this time, everyone's eyes were fixed on Niet Tian and Ingenue with a puzzled look. They also didn't expect that the confrontation between Niet Tian and Ingenue would be so calm. Only one person stared at Ingenue with fiery eyes, the blood chi in his body surging, and even the Inue evil seal in his body almost couldn't be suppressed. Seeing Ingenue again, the anger in Gale Little's heart could be imagined. If he didn't have a little rationality left, he would definitely rush up and fight Ingenue. But he couldn't because he was too weak. Mizuhara Kaori kept an eye on Gale Little to prevent him from doing anything stupid. In fact, it was not a bad opportunity to attack Ingenue now. But looking at Nietion's attitude, he seemed to be planning something, so Mizuhara Kaori didn't dare to act rashly. "What's your name?" At this moment, In Xianyue suddenly asked. "Nietion." Tianling replied coldly. He was also very curious about what In Xianyue was thinking. "Nietion, is it?" In Xianyue laughed and immediately said in a loud voice, "Nietion, you openly provoked this princess, which is already a crime punishable by death. However, this princess can see that you are extremely talented, a rare martial arts genius. So, this princess is willing to give you a chance to live. As long as you are willing to bow your head and admit your mistake, and then obediently become this princess's martial slave, this princess can spare your life." In Xinyue's voice was very calm, very dull, but there was an inviolable overbearingness in her tone. It seemed that, in her opinion, letting Nietion be her martial slave was already very generous. "Become your martial slave?" Nietion frowned and couldn't help but laugh, but then his face sank, and he said coldly, "In Xianyue, you should keep this chance to live for yourself. I, Nietion, don't need it." "Huh?" In Xianyue's cold eyes narrowed, and a cold, killing intent surged in her eyes. She was very surprised that Nietion would give up a chance to live. In her opinion, Nietion had no chance to leave here alive. "Nietion, since you have given up this chance to live, then don't blame this princess." In Xianyue smiled cold, and immediately walked over step by step, the dark aura around her body becoming more and more obvious. "Her Royal Highness, is she going to fight personally?" The crowd saw this scene and could not help but tremble and exclaim. Judging from In Xianyue's actions, she was going to personally kill Nietion. "Oh no!" The sudden scene made Gale Zhao's expression change, and he directly exclaimed. He did not expect that In Xianyue would personally step onto the Azura arena. His original plan was to let Mizuhara Kaori capture In Xianyue alive, but now In Xianyue was actually going to fight Nietion. So far, the strength that Nietion had shown was very strong and incredible. But Gale Xiao still felt that Nietion could not be In Xianyue's match. He knew better than anyone else how powerful the In Xianyue's evil seal was. In Xianyue's bloodline seal was extremely terrifying, and it could instantly kill an ordinary peak paramount god expert. Now that In Xianyue had the strength of a late-stage paramount god, her terror was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Nietion, Mizuhara Kaori, also frowned, unable to conceal the nervousness in her eyes. Nietion was a saint arbiter of the 9 clans. If something really happened to him, it would be troublesome. But now, In Xianyue's figure had already appeared on the Azura arena, and the battle between her and Nietion could no longer be stopped. Very well, then let me see how powerful the legendary In Xianyue's evil seal is. When Nietion saw In Xianyue approaching step by step, there was not fear in his eyes, but a fierce fighting spirit. Chapter 2144. On the Azura battle platform, Nietion and In Xianyue confronted each other. Everyone's eyes were focused on the two figures on the fighting ring. Their eyes were burning with anticipation for an exciting battle. "Nietion, it is your honor to die in my hands." In Xianyue smiled cold, and the dark aura circulating around his body spread out in an instant. Black runes, like dancing snakes, rushed in all directions, as if to devour everything. Dark Moon, Evil Seal. The black-clothed referee saw this scene from the sky, and his eyes trembled, and he could not help but roar. He did not expect In Xianyue to be so calm, using the Dark Moon Evil Seal as soon as he attacked. He did not intend to give Nietion any chance to resist. Damn it! At the same time, Gale Zhao's eyes trembled, and he roared. He felt that if In Xianyue did not activate the Dark Moon Evil Seal, Nietion might be able to resist for a while, but now, Nietion could not compete with In Xianyue at all. Mizuhara Kaori also sensed that something was wrong, and her eyes trembled slightly, ready to make a move. "Mizuhara Kaori, don't be impulsive." Gale Xiao remained calm at the moment, and secretly transmitted his voice to Mizuhara Kaori, reminding her to calm down. Outside the Azura battle platform, there were dozens of Azura shadow guards lurking. If Mizuhara Kaori made a move, it would undoubtedly attract these shadow guards, and the situation would be even more difficult to deal with. Now, their only chance was to pin their hopes on Nyetian, and hope that Nyetian could defeat In Jianyue. Boundary. On the Azura battle platform, Nyetian could feel the power of the black runes in the space, and he could not help but frown, and he was surprised. In Jianyue was very smart, and did not underestimate Nyetian, but regarded the latter as a real opponent. Nyetian, be careful of these runes. Don't let them get close to you. At the same time, Fat Cat's voice sounded, reminding Nyetian. Nyetian nodded, and his whole body surged with star power, condensing into a star soul armor to prevent the black runes from approaching. Nyetian, are you getting nervous? At this time, In Jianyue's voice resounded in the air, and it was filled with a sinister aura. At this moment, what she was activating was the Shadow Moon Demonic Seal's Shadow Moon Boundless World Barrier. As the In Moon runes became increasingly dense, the entire Azura battle platform fell into darkness. It's just a barrier. It can't hurt me. With a low roar, Nyetian's figure moved as the starry heavenly slash stabbed out. A sword light whistled out, and in the dark space, it was like a bolt of lightning streaking across the night sky as it suddenly struck towards In Jianyue. In Xinyue's beautiful eyes flickered, and she struck out with her palm. A black crescent moon appeared, directly shattering the sword light in the air. In the endless dark moon realm, In Xinyue's strength had improved in all aspects, and Nyetian's sword intent couldn't hurt her at all. Starfire Burning Sea. Immediately afterward, the sword intent around Nyetian's body expanded wildly, and he struck out with his sword again. The swift and fierce sword intent and the power of the stars fused together, turning into a huge sword shadow burning with flames. Like a fire dragon, it rushed over. Rumble! The surging sword intent set off a raging wave in the space, bursting out with terrifying power. A little interesting. In Xianyue felt the pressure in the sword intent and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, but there was a contemptuous smile on her face. She felt a strange power in Nyetian's sword intent, but it didn't pose a threat to her. Inu cross annihilation. Immediately, In Xianyue's cold eyes trembled. She crossed her hands and suddenly slashed out. Two dark crescent moons whistled out, forming a dark cross, and bombarded the space. Boom! Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, the dark cross fell and collided with the flaming sword shadow. A loud explosion sounded, and endless dark force was released in an instant. The flaming sword shadow was like a leaf in the wind and instantly collapsed. What a strong power! At this moment, Nyetian suddenly felt a terrifying power rushing towards him. He frowned, and the star's soul wings appeared on his back, and he retreated immediately. His reaction was fast, but he was still a step too late. Bang! The dark cross rushed over, and Nyetian's figure was sent flying. While he was still in the air, he directly spurted out a mouthful of blood. But in the next moment, he stabilized his body, and a pair of cold eyes stared at In Xianyue in the darkness. In Xianyue's strength had exceeded Nyetian's expectations. The power of the Inu Evil Seal was indeed terrifying. Nyetian estimated that In Xianyue, who had activated the Inu world, was stronger than Heisha and the others, and could almost compete with Mizuhara Kaori. Not dead. In Xianyue saw that Nyetian was not dead, and couldn't help but be surprised and sneered. Nyetian, you were hit head-on by my cross-annihilation, but you didn't die. It seems that not only is your combat power strong, but your martial body is even more powerful. To be able to surprise you, should I also feel honored? Nyetian replied with a smile, and then looked at Niro, who was beside him, and noticed that the latter's purple lightning heaven battle armor and star soul shield had cracks, and she was about to collapse. Let row or hide in the nine extremities first. After thinking for a while, the wings behind Nyetian flapped, and he instantly appeared beside Nyeyuro. Big brother Nyetian, are you okay? Nyeyuro saw that Nyetian was injured and couldn't help but ask nervously. I'm fine. Nyetian smiled faintly and directly took out the 9 extremities. With a thought, the 9 extremities released a ray of light, and he said, Rower, hide first. Big brother Nyetian. Nyeyuro was stunned for a moment, and then tears welled up in her eyes. Of course, she knew that Nyetian was worried about her safety, and that was why he wanted her to hide. Rower, believe me, I will be fine. Nyetian smiled faintly, and his eyes revealed strong confidence. Nyeyuro nodded, and then stepped out, entering the 9 extremities. She is my martial slave. Can you take her away? Insienue saw this scene, and her pretty face turned cold, and the killing intent in her eyes instantly became stronger. I can take her away after I kill you. Nye Tianling laughed, and the sword intent in his body surged crazily. He said in a deep voice, Insienue, the battle between us has just begun. Is that so? Insienue snorted coldly, and the moon runes on her body began to soar, filling the space and circulating wildly. The space above the Azura battle platform became darker and darker, as if it had fallen into night. The faces of the crowd kept changing, and they were stunned speechless. They could only hear the voices of Nye Tian and Insienue, but they couldn't see their figures, and they were very anxious. The power of Moon Evil Seal is really strange. Even I can't sense the existence of the two of them. The black-clothed referee frowned. As the Moon boundary became stronger and stronger, he could no longer sense Nye Tian and Insienue. At this moment, the people outside could only see darkness, and they had no idea what was happening on the Azura battle platform. Chapter 2145. Ingenue didn't seem to want to waste time on Nye Tian, and was ready to use the bloodline power of the Dark Moon Evil Seal to kill the latter. At the same time, Nye Tian suddenly felt that the power of the Dark Moon runes in the surrounding space had become stronger, like maggots in the tarsal bone, constantly invading his star soul armor. What a strange power! Nye Tian's expression changed, and he was shocked. He could feel that the Dark Moon runes in the space were very terrifying, as if they wanted to invade his body and devour his strength. Nye Tian, this is a very strange kind of rune power. Don't let the runes invade your body. Fat Cat's voice sounded, with a hint of worry. He didn't expect the power of the Dark Moon Evil Seal to be so strange. Brat, you are very talented, but you don't know how to cherish it, and want to die in vain. At this time, Ingenue's voice sounded again, like a funeral bell, resounding in the dark space. You will soon know that in front of this princess, you are just an ant. Nye Tian felt that the dark aura in the space was constantly getting stronger, and he couldn't help but feel a little nervous, and the star power in his body crazily surged out, surging in the space. Everyone could hear the voice on the Azura battle platform, but they couldn't see any scene, and they couldn't help but feel anxious, wishing they could rush to the battle platform. Dark Moon's sacrificial slaughter. In the next moment, In Yayue's voice resounded. Shortly after, the void suddenly trembled, and a dark full moon appeared. It was as if a boundless dark beast had appeared, and its imposing aura engulfed everything in its path. Sword ceiling forbidden array, open. Nye Tian's eyebrows furrowed as he sensed the unfavorable situation. Immediately after, his body trembled, and countless wisps of blood-colored aura shot out of his body, fused with the sword intent around him, and transformed into numerous restrictive spell symbols that swirled around him. At this moment, he realized how terrifying Ingenue was, and he had to go all out. This battle was going to be much more difficult than Nye Tian had imagined. Sword formation? Ingenue looked at Nye Tian cold. His eyes were like the abyss of darkness, desolate and murderous. Nye Tian, your sword formation is too weak. It can't save your life. Ingenue sneered. With a thought, the moon in the void suddenly pressed down, like an ancient night, devouring everything. Demon sword incinerates the world, kill. At the same time, Nietion let out a low roar and stabbed out with the starlight heaven slash. The boundless power of the array instantly condensed, and a flaming blood-red sword appeared. With the momentum of a dragon soaring into the sky, it pressed down on the darkening moon. Boom! In the next instant, the two enormous forces collided head-on, causing the space around them to tremble violently. A deafening explosion rang out, followed by a series of ear-piercing sounds. In the void, the sword intent, blood chi, and the power of darkness raged wildly. The space was constantly shaking, and waves of terrible air rolled, as if the world was about to shatter. Under the illumination of the sword radiance, the crowd finally saw some dazzling scenes, and their faces were filled with horror. They didn't expect that this battle would be so fierce. What a terrifying sword intent. It can actually compete with the power of the moon. The black-clothed referee's eyes trembled as he saw the scene below, and his heart was filled with horror. At this moment, he was not shocked by Ingenue's strength, but by Nietion's strength. This Long My Kid's Sword Dao realm is only at the realm of Sword Oblivion, but his sword intent is so terrifying. If he reaches the peak of Sword Martial Unity realm, how amazing will his sword intent be? The black-clothed referee frowned and thought to himself. Crack! At this moment, a crisp sound suddenly came from the void. The blood-red flaming sword suddenly shook, and finally, unable to withstand the tremendous power of the darkening moon, it collapsed with a loud bang. Boom! The moment the sword's shadow collapsed, a terrible sword intent burst out, impacted the space, and turned into a wave of sword intent. In the next moment, the darkening moon, like a mad beast, suddenly fell and pressed down on Nietion. Bang! With a muffled sound, Nietion's figure flew straight out, leaving a trail of blood in the air, and smashed into the walls around the Azura battle platform like a speeding stone. The walls around the Azura battle platform were made of black stones that had been fused with iron crystals and were reinforced by the power of a formation. Nietion's body directly smashed into the wall, which showed how strong the impact was. At this moment, the crowd's eyes trembled violently, and their expressions instantly froze. They saw a blood-red trail across, and although they didn't see Nietion's face clearly, they were very sure that it was Nietion. That Dragon Vein kid is dead. The black-clothed referee was stunned for a few seconds, and finally reacted and said in astonishment. Although he had expected this result, when it really happened, he still felt it was difficult to accept. The shock that Nietion gave him before was too strong, and now that he died in the hands of Insienue, he felt a little unreal. Nietion, you are really strong. If you were a swordsman who could fuse sword and martial arts together, I'm afraid the result of this battle would be unpredictable. At this moment, Insinue's voice sounded, and she said in a deep voice, "But now, you are still dead. But your death is not unjust, because you died under the Dark Moon Evil Seal." At this time, Insinue's expression was very gloomy, and there was a bit of surprise in her eyes, and even a little fear. She also didn't expect that Nietion's sword intent was so strong that it could block the Dark Moon Evil Seal in an instant. But unfortunately, the Dark Moon Evil Seal eventually destroyed Nietion's sword intent. Insienue saw with her own eyes that Nietion was hit head-on by the Dark Moon Evil Seal, and his body was blasted into the wall of the battle platform. This kind of impact was enough to destroy the martial body of a peak supreme god martial artist. No matter how strong Nietion was, it was impossible for him to withstand this kind of power. Therefore, Insienue was sure that Nietion was dead. Then, the dark aura around Insienue gradually dimmed, and the space above the Azura battle platform became much clearer. Everyone looked over, but they only saw Insinue's figure, and not Nietion's figure. This scene announced the result of the battle. Insienue killed Nietion. Nietion. At this moment, an angry howl sounded, and it was Gale Xiao Xiao, Lord Saint Duelist. Almost at the same time, Mizuhara Kori's voice also sounded, with unconcealable grief. The two people's roars added a tinge of sorrow to the atmosphere. Gale Xiao Xiao, you're already a stray dog. You should just obediently linger on with your last breath. Insienue suddenly raised his head and finally locked his eyes on Gale Xiao Xiao and said in a cold tone, "But you're still restless," and insisted on looking for this princess. Nie Tian's death is the biggest warning to you. Remember this princess's words. You are destined to live like a dog for the rest of your life. As the cold voice fell, each word was like a steel needle, piercing into Gale Xiao Xiao's heart, causing him to tremble and almost fall. Gale Xiao Xiao, Insienue sneered again and wanted to continue, but was interrupted by another sneer. Insienue. Suddenly, a low voice sounded, with a hint of coldness and mockery. Chapter 2146. Insienue heard it very clearly. The voice that suddenly sounded was none other than Nie Tian. The others were also taken aback at the same time, but in the next moment, they reacted. Their eyes trembled, and a look of disbelief appeared on their faces. Nie Tian didn't die. Everyone turned their eyes and stared at the cave on the wall, waiting for something with fiery eyes. Insienue, you talk too much nonsense. Under the gaze of countless people, a blood-red figure walked out. His star-like eyes released a cold light, and he said coldly, "Do you think that the battle between us is over? It's really him." Everyone exclaimed when they saw the blood-red figure, and they couldn't believe their eyes. That blood-red figure was none other than Nie Tian. No one expected that Nie Tian was still alive. Nie Tian. Gale Xiao Zhao's eyes trembled when he saw Nie Tian's figure, and he was dumbfounded. Lord Saint Duelist. Mizuhara Kaori was also excited, and she almost cried. High up in the sky, the black-clothed referee stared at Nie Tian with a look of disbelief on his face. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that Nie Tian would be able to survive such a serious injury. Nie Tian's martial physique was unimaginably strong. Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. At this time, Insinue's voice sounded, but she no longer had her previous calmness. Instead, it was replaced by great shock and surprise, and even some unconcealable panic. She couldn't understand how Nie Tian could survive after being hit head-on by the dark and sinister moon. Nothing is impossible. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said in a cold voice, "Insienue, if you want to kill me, this power alone is not enough." Boom! As the arrogant voice fell, Nie Tian's body shook, and the blood stains on his body surged away. Although his face was slightly pale, his eyes were still firm and bright. Insinue's eyes trembled, and then calmed down a lot. His whole body released a cold, killing intent, and he said in a deep voice, "Nie Tian, you have angered me." "Really?" Nie Tianling laughed and said provocatively, "Insienue, in my opinion, your strength is only SOSO. The bloodline seal of your Inu imperial family is just a joke." Such arrogance. Insienue roared in a low voice, his eyes glowing a dark red. It was obvious that he was extremely furious. She had always been proud of her identity as the eldest princess of the Inu Empire, but now, Nie Tian mocked her bloodline seal. This was intolerable. When everyone heard Nie Tian's words, they were stunned. They all felt that Nie Tian was too arrogant. Even though Insinue's move failed to kill Nie Tian, it had seriously injured Nie Tian. In everyone's opinion, Insinue's strength was still far above Nie Tian's. Nie Tian was indeed too arrogant to mock someone stronger than him. Nie Tian, go to hell. In the next moment, Insinue's figure moved, and his whole body turned into a dark shadow. With extreme speed, he attacked Nie Tian. Nie Tian felt Insinue's powerful attack, and his brows furrowed slightly. Dragon chi suddenly burst out of his body, and a sea of crimson lightning appeared again, and a giant crimson dragon emerged from the void. Dragon vein power again. The black-clothed referee's eyes trembled when he saw this scene, and his eyes were blazing. Can this kind of power stop this princess? Insienue roared, and a terrible dark aura permeated his body. His whole body seemed to have turned into a huge black storm, rolling up boundless power, and blasted toward Nietion. Roar! Nietion was not afraid at all. Stepping on the giant crimson dragon, the dragon's roar shook the heaven and earth, and the huge dragon body rushed toward Jianwei. Boom! Chi chi chi! Immediately, the black storm swept over and actually enveloped the giant crimson dragon body. The boundless power of darkness was released, and once again the surrounding space was submerged, and an ear-piercing sound rang out. The figures of Nietion and Jianwei disappeared into the endless darkness. The eyes of the crowd trembled, but they could not see the scene of the battle, so they could only worry. In the darkness, Jianwei's figure was like a black lightning bolt, and the black runes around his body turned into sharp blades that mercilessly attacked the body of the giant crimson dragon. Nietion activated the Star Soul Armor, controlled the giant crimson dragon, and actually approached Jianwei. Chi chi chi. As the black runes became more and more violent, the body of the giant crimson dragon was being torn apart bit by bit, as if it was going to collapse in the next moment. Nietion, this princess will destroy your dragon. Let's see how you fight. Jianwei roared wildly, and the black runes in the sky turned into a crazy storm, shrouding over. Nietion's eyes were firm and fearless, and he rushed straight towards Jianwei. At this moment, Jianwei was already in a state of fury, and for Nietion, this was the most dangerous and also the best opportunity. He was going to use absolute confinement on Jianwei. Absolute confinement. This was Nietion's last chance. If he succeeded, he could severely injure Jianwei and then control her. You're courting death. Jianwei saw Nietion rushing over and sneered and said coldly, "Do you really think your martial body is invincible? My martial body is not invincible. It's just that your Jianwei evil seal is too weak." Nietion responded with extreme contempt, wanting to provoke Jianwei more thoroughly. "Aunt, you're too arrogant." Jianwei's eyes trembled, and his eyes turned red, and he shouted wildly, "The price of angering this princess is only one word, death." This time, Jianwei was completely enraged, and moon runes kept gushing out of his body, turning his whole body into a huge dark abyss. At this time, Nietion desperately rushed over. The crimson dragon under his feet could no longer withstand the impact of the moon runes and was collapsing uncontrollably. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. The next moment, the Star Soul armor on Nietion's body also began to crack, and suddenly, the black runes poured in and directly rushed into his body. A sudden sharp pain struck his whole body in an instant, and Nietion couldn't help but let out a miserable howl. The power of the moon runes was too terrifying, and Nietion felt as if there were countless wild beasts attacking his body, wanting to completely tear him apart. Nietion quickly used the power of the divine and demon to force the moon runes out. At the critical moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded, and she shouted nervously. Nietion's eyes trembled, and from the divine and demon sea in his body, a stream of divine and demon force gushed out and instantly spread to his limbs and veins. Under the impact of the divine and demon sea, the moon runes were unable to resist and were directly forced out of his body. At the same time, Nietion's figure was less than 10 meters away from Jianwei. This is the moment. With a thought, Nietion's eyes suddenly trembled, and suddenly a terrible spiritual deterrence appeared, enveloping Jianwei. Jianwei originally thought that Nietion was already an arrow at the end of its flight and had no strength to resist, so he completely let his guard down. Chapter 21:47. Absolute Confinement. Success. In an instant, Nietion felt that Jianwei's divine sense had weakened and couldn't help but exclaim in joy. At this moment, the moon runes around Jianwei's body instantly weakened, and the aura around her body also calmed down. "Good timing, kill her." At this moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded, urging Nietion. Nietion's eyebrows furrowed, as his mind raced. He did have the opportunity to kill Enchantment now, but did he really want to do so? Enchantment was very strong, but her martial body was very ordinary. As long as Tion attacked with his sword, she could definitely be killed directly. However, Tion did not intend to do so, because Gale Xiao Xiao wanted to capture Enchantment alive. If Enchantment died, no one could prove Gale Xiao Xiao's innocence. With this thought in mind, Tion directly stabbed with his sword. Suddenly, a sword shadow appeared, but it turned into 6 sword rays, accurately bombarding Enchantment's 6 vital points, cutting off the 6 major meridians in her body. The moment the sword rays fell, Enchantment's whole body spurted out blood, and her whole body was directly covered in blood. Tion had severed all 6 of her meridians, but hadn't killed her. In this state, even Enchantment completely lost the power to fight back. At this moment, Enchantment suddenly woke up, and the sharp pain all over her body made her scream. Immediately, she saw that her whole body was covered in blood, and she was scared out of her wits. She couldn't even figure out what had happened in that split second. She looked at Tion in horror, and the fear in her heart was all expressed on her face. Tion ignored her, and his figure moved. 9 extreme techniques directly opened, enveloping Enchantment, and then a pair of wings appeared behind him, and his figure rushed into the sky. At this time, the moon runes in the surrounding space had not completely dissipated, and it was the best time for Tion to take advantage of the chaos to escape. If he waited for the others to react, it would not be so easy for him to leave with Enchantment. Tion's figure was like a bolt of lightning as he shot up into the sky, brushing past the black-clothed referee. The black-clothed referee was stunned at first, but he immediately understood and shouted, "He's trying to escape! Stop him!" But unfortunately, Tion's figure was extremely fast, directly leaving the Azura battle platform. "What's going on? What happened?" The crowd of onlookers cried out in surprise. They had no idea what was going on, and they all had a dazed look on their faces. "Mizuhara Kaori, Gale Xiao Xiao, let's go." Tion shouted from midair. "You want to leave? Not so easy." However, right at this moment, the black-clothed referee let out a furious roar. The aura around his body rose as he punched out. A terrifying fish shadow appeared, smashing towards Tion. The black-robed judge was a peak paramount god, and his enraged fist strike was incredibly powerful. At this moment, Tion was heavily injured. His vital chi was nearly depleted, and he could not withstand this punch at all. "Tion, you guys go first. I'll cover you." At this critical moment, Mizuhara Kaori's voice rang out. She dashed towards Tion, and at the same time, her body lit up with 5 layers of bright light, like ripples, enveloping the space. What a mysterious power! Tion could not help but exclaim when he saw this. Mizuhara Kaori was indeed a genius of the 5 elements. Her control of the power of the 5 elements was so exquisite. Boom! In the next moment, the fist shadow landed, but it was blocked by Mizuhara Kaori's 5 elements halo. "How dare you attack the Saint Duelist? You deserve to die." Mizuhara Kaori's figure appeared beside Tion, and she stared coldly at the black-clothed referee. She actually wanted to kill him. "Mizuhara Kaori, ignore him, let's go." Tion grabbed Mizuhara Kaori, and the 2 of them dashed towards Gale Xiao Xiao. With Mizuhara Kaori's strength, she might really be able to kill the black-clothed referee in a second, but it would undoubtedly delay them. If the Azura Shadow Guards stopped them, they would be in trouble. Big Boss Tion. When Gale Xiao Xiao saw Tion and Mizuhara Kaori charging towards him, his eyes lit up with excitement, and a pair of light wings appeared on his back. Next, it was time for him to show off. On the other side, the crowd was already in chaos, and they began to scatter in all directions. High up in the sky, dozens of Azura Shadow Guards appeared, each of them exuding a powerful aura, and their expressions were ferocious. "Brat, I want to see how you're going to escape from the Dark Knight Azura field." The black-clothed referee's eyes were bloodshot, and he roared in rage. If we want to leave, Do you think you can stop us? Gale Xiao Xiao chuckled and looked at the black-clothed referee mockingly. The wings on his back shrouded Nyetian and Mizuhara Kori. When the black-clothed referee saw Gale Xiao Xiao, he immediately thought of something and shouted in horror, "Quick, quick, quick! Stop them! Goodbye!" Gale Xiao Xiao laughed, and his figure moved instantly. He was as fast as lightning, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared. The Gale clan's strongest bloodline was the Gale bloodline, and Gale Xiao Xiao's bloodline power was the strongest in the entire Gale clan. Even the Een Moon demonic seal in his body could not suppress the growth of his bloodline power. His battle power was very weak, but in terms of speed, he was definitely at the peak. In the entire Abandoned Land, perhaps only a few peak experts could catch up with Gale Xiao Xiao. The dozens of Azura shadow guards watched helplessly as Gale Xiao Xiao escaped, and they did not even have the time to react. They looked at each other with blank expressions. Damn it! The black-clothed referee roared, and he was about to go mad. He had seen with his own eyes that Nyetian had severely injured Een Jianyue, but he did not kill him. Instead, he had taken him away. He did not know why Nyetian did not kill Een Jianyue, but he knew that only one person could walk out of the Azura battle arena alive. Moreover, Nyetian had captured Een Jianyue in the Dark Night Azura field, which in itself was a provocation to the Azura field. A bunch of trash. What are you waiting for? Tell the people outside that the eldest princess of the Inoue Empire has been kidnapped. The black-clothed referee shouted angrily, and then his figure moved and he rushed out. At the same time, Nyetian and the others had already left the Dark Night Azura field. Gale Xiao Xiao's speed was very fast, and he soon left everyone behind. The experts lurking outside the Azura field did not know what had happened, so they did not stop Nyetian and the others. After a while, Gale Xiao Xiao's speed slowed down. With his current strength, he could not maintain his speed for too long. Boss Nyetian, you have killed Een Jianyue, so you must leave this place as soon as possible. I must also inform the family to prepare for war with the Inoue imperial family. Gale Xiao Xiao panted and said nervously. He did not see Nyetian put Een Jianyue into the 9 extremities, and he thought that Nyetian had killed Een Jianyue. This result was not bad, but it was not what he wanted. He originally only wanted to capture Een Jianyue and force him to tell the truth, so that he, Gale Xiao Xiao, could be cleared. But now that Een Jianyue was dead, things were troublesome. Next, Nyetian would definitely be hunted by the Inoue Empire, and the Gale clan would completely fall out with the Inoue imperial family.